The letter vanished before Lady Honoria Vale could read it. She saw the corner of it only once, pale cream beneath the morning tray, her name written in a solicitor's narrow hand, before Lady Portia's maid lifted the silver cover and the letter was gone as neatly as if it had never existed. By evening, no one in Vale House admitted it had arrived. Not the butler, whose eye slid toward the carpet. Not the footman, who murmured that the post had been unusually light. Not Lady Portia, who looked at Honoria over the rim of her teacup and said, "My dear, at 40, one must be careful not to invent dramas simply because life has grown quiet." Honoria had not answered. A younger woman might have flushed, protested, demanded the tray be brought back, and every servant questioned. Honoria had learned long ago that outrage, in a woman no longer young, was renamed hysteria before it reached the drawing-room door. So she did what she had done for 20 years of London seasons, family economies, polite slights, and smiling injuries. She lowered her eyes, finished her tea, and remembered. Now, in the narrow bedchamber allotted to her at the back of the Mayfair house, she sat beside the dressing table with a pearl-grey glove spread across her lap. The glove had been turned twice at the wrist and mended once along the thumb. Tonight, the seam had given way again. Honoria threaded the needle by candlelight, her hand steady despite the ache behind her ribs. Downstairs, carriages had already begun rolling along the street, wheels hissing over damp stone. Lady Renwick's assembly would be crowded by 10 o'clock, bright with music, candlelight, ambition, and the terrible freshness of girls who still believed a dance card could alter a life. Honoria had once believed that, too. She had believed it at 18, when her first white gown had smelled faintly of lavender and starch. She had believed it at 22, when 3 gentlemen had asked for second dances and none had called the next day. She had believed it at 27, because hope had not yet learned shame. By 35, hope had become a private habit, like touching a bruise to see whether it still hurt. At 40, she had decided to stop. The needle passed through the fine old kid leather. In. Out. In. Out. A small repair for a small ruin. She smiled at the thought, not because it amused her, but because bitterness had never suited her face. On the dressing table lay the relics of a woman who had been expected to disappear gracefully. A fan with one cracked ivory stick. A string of modest seed pearls left by her mother. A stack of dance cards tied with a faded ribbon, most of them nearly empty. Honoria had meant to throw them away that morning. Instead, she had placed them in a small walnut box and locked it. One did not need to worship old disappointments. One also did not need to leave them out for Lady Portia to count. The door to the adjoining dressing room stood slightly ajar. Honoria had not opened it. Sound carried in old houses whether one invited it or not. Cecily's voice floated through first, bright and impatient. "Must Cousin Honoria come tonight? Lady Renwick's rooms will be full of people who matter." There was a pause, then the smooth, practiced sigh of Lady Portia Vale. "She must come because appearances must be maintained. Your late uncle's daughter cannot be hidden in the attic like a cracked basin. People will think she is my chaperone. Then let them. A chaperone is useful, provided she does not imagine herself a rival." Honoria drew the thread tight. The seam closed under her fingers. "I don't mean to be cruel," Cecily said, in the tone of girls who always meant to be cruel and wished to be praised for noticing. "But she looks so solemn in light colors. It reminds one of old wedding cake." Lady Portia gave a low laugh. "Do not waste wit on her, Cecily. Save it for the Duke, should he truly attend." The needle stopped. Only for a moment. Honoria lowered it again. "Do you believe he will?" Cecily asked. "The Duke of Aldermere has avoided half of London for years. Powerful men may avoid society, but they rarely avoid admiration forever. His Grace is unmarried, wealthy, and still young enough to be persuaded that a pretty wife would improve his table. If he appears tonight, you will be placed where he cannot fail to see you. And Cousin Honoria will stand where she has always stood. At the edge." The word should not have hurt. Edges were familiar. Honoria knew the geography of them well. The edge of a ballroom, near the potted palms. The edge of a conversation, smiling when a pause allowed it. The edge of family decisions, useful enough to consult when handwriting was needed for invitations, invisible when money was discussed. Still, the thread blurred for a moment. She blinked once, sharply, and the room returned to itself. "I only hope she doesn't look hopeful," Cecily said. "It would be mortifying." Lady Portia's reply came colder. "At her age, hope is not romantic. It is untidy." Silence followed, broken by the rustle of silk and the closing of a drawer. Honoria finished the final stitch, knotted the thread, and bit it clean. The glove was not beautiful. It would not withstand close inspection. But it was whole enough to be worn. That, perhaps, was all anyone required of her as well. She rose and crossed to the looking-glass. The woman reflected there was not a girl, and the glass did not lie to comfort her. Her face had softened with time, not faded. Fine lines rested at the corners of her eyes. Her dark hair, arranged by her own hands because Lady Portia had claimed the maid for Cecily, held one silver thread near the temple. Her gown was pale blue silk from 3 seasons past, altered carefully at the waist and freshened with a lace fichu. Respectable. Modest. Unlikely to invite attention. That had become the safest costume of her life. On the mantel sat the small walnut box. Honoria unlocked it and looked one last time at the old dance cards inside. Names written in ink. Promises that had lasted 12 minutes at a time. She touched the top card, then closed the lid. "No more," she said softly. Her own voice startled her. It sounded calm. Not broken. Not brave, exactly. Simply finished. A knock came, and the door opened before permission was granted. Lady Portia entered in amethyst satin, with diamonds at her throat that had not belonged to her until after she married into the Vale family. Behind her, Cecily shone in white muslin and pale pink ribbons, pretty in the effortless way of a girl who had never been asked to apologize for taking up space. Lady Portia's gaze passed over Honoria from hair to hem, pausing at the mended glove. "That will have to do." "I am ready," Honoria said. Cecily tilted her head. "Are those the grey gloves again?" "They are clean." "I didn't ask if they were clean." Lady Portia lifted one hand. "Enough. His Grace may attend tonight, and I will not have the family arrive in a mood of provincial squabbling." Honoria picked up her reticule. "You need not fear me, Lady Portia. I have no intention of competing with Cecily." "Of course you do not," Portia said with a smile. "Competition implies possibility." The room went very still. Honoria felt the words settle around her, delicate as dust, dirty as soot. She could have lowered her head. She had done so often enough. Instead, she met Lady Portia's eyes in the mirror. Possibility is not always visible from where others choose to stand. Cecily gave a small laugh, uncertain whether it was a triumph or an insult. Lady Portia's smile thinned. "Take care, Honoria. Wit becomes unbecoming when it arrives too late. Then I shall use it sparingly." For the first time that evening, Portia looked at her not as furniture, nor inconvenience, nor faded relation, but as something that might require watching. The look lasted only a second. Then she turned. "Come. The carriage is waiting." The descent through Vale House felt longer than usual. The hall smelled of beeswax and cold flowers. A footman held the door open while refusing to meet Honoria's gaze. She wondered whether he had seen the solicitor's letter. She wondered whether fear had made him silent or payment had made him useful. Outside, the family carriage stood beneath the lamps, black lacquer gleaming, horses restless in the damp London air. Cecily stepped in first, gathering her skirts as if the world had been upholstered for her convenience. Lady Portia followed. Honoria paused with one gloved hand on the carriage door. Behind her, Vale House rose narrow and handsome, every window lit for the sake of appearances. Somewhere inside, perhaps in Lady Portia's desk or in the ash at the back of the kitchen grate, lay the answer to a question no one wished her to ask. "Honoria," Lady Portia called from within, soft and sharp. "Do not keep us waiting." Honoria climbed into the carriage and took the backward-facing seat. Cecily glanced at her gloves again, then smiled toward the dark window. "Pray no one mistakes you for my chaperone, cousin." Honoria folded her mended hands in her lap. The old pearl grey leather creased, but the new stitches held. "Do not worry, Cecily," she said. By the end of the evening, I am certain everyone will know exactly who I am. The carriage stopped before Lady Renwick's house in a line of polished vehicles that stretched nearly the length of the square, each one surrendering silk, feathers, jewels, ambition, and calculation beneath the glow of the entrance lamps. Honoria stepped down last. The damp evening air touched her face with a chill that felt cleaner than the perfumed warmth waiting inside, and for one brief moment, while Lady Portia adjusted Cecily's shawl and the footman looked past them toward the next arriving carriage, Honoria stood alone upon the pavement and allowed herself to breathe. The stitches in her glove held. That seemed a small mercy, but small mercies had often been the only kind granted to her. Lady Renwick's assembly rooms were already bright with candles when they entered, and the sound struck Honoria first. Music from the far end. Laughter near the card room. The rustle of skirts like restless wings. Names being announced with varying degrees of importance by a butler whose voice warmed noticeably when titles rose above Baron. Lady Portia became gracious the moment she crossed the threshold, as if kindness had been waiting in Lady Renwick's hall and she had merely forgotten to wear it at home. "Smile, Cecily," she murmured. Not too eagerly. A young lady should appear pleased to be admired, not hungry for it. Cecily lifted her chin and arranged her expression into something sweet enough to be believed by strangers. Honoria followed 2 steps behind, the exact distance society preferred for a woman who belonged to a family but not to its hopes. Lady Renwick greeted them beneath a gilt mirror, her silver hair crowned with lace, her eyes sharp enough to count every secret in a room before supper. Lady Portia. Miss Vale. Lady Honoria. The order was kind enough to be polite and cruel enough to be accurate. Honoria dipped a curtsy. "Lady Renwick, your rooms are as elegant as ever. And you are as constant as ever, my dear." Lady Renwick's gaze flicked to the pearl-grey gloves. A rare quality in an age of restless girls. Constancy is often what remains when fashion has finished making demands, Honoria replied. Lady Renwick's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Take care, Lady Honoria. If you speak so sensibly, people may begin to suspect you have been listening all these years." "That would be unfortunate," Honoria said. "I should hate to frighten them." Lady Renwick let out a soft, surprised sound, and for a second, Honoria felt the strange relief of being understood by someone who had also survived society long enough to stop mistaking manners for mercy. Then Lady Portia's fingers closed lightly around Cecily's arm and guided her toward a cluster of young ladies near the pianoforte, leaving Honoria to find the place she knew best. Not a chair. Chairs implied permanence. Not the wall. The wall made pity too easy. She chose the space near the refreshment table, close enough to be useful if Lady Portia needed her and far enough from the dancing that no gentleman would be forced into the embarrassment of pretending not to see her empty card. A footman offered lemonade. She accepted it. She did not drink. Across the room, Cecily bloomed under attention. 2 young men requested dances before the first set began. A third hovered nearby, waiting for his chance. Lady Portia watched with the serenity of a general who had placed artillery in the correct field. Honoria did not resent Cecily's youth. Youth was not a moral failing. It became cruel only when older women sharpened it into a weapon and placed it in a girl's hand. "Is that Lady Honoria Vale?" a voice whispered behind a spray of hothouse greenery. "I had not realized she still came to assemblies." "Why should she not?" another replied. "She is useful. One always needs unmarried female relations to fill a carriage." A third voice, lower and amused, added, 40, is she not?" "At least. I remember my older sister saying Lady Honoria was considered pleasant in her first season." "Pleasant," the first woman echoed. "Poor creature. Such a deadly word." Honoria held the glass more carefully. Lemonade trembled against the rim, but not enough to spill. She had endured worse. She had endured the smile of a gentleman who had asked another woman to dance while still standing before her. She had endured a mother telling her daughter not to stand too near Honoria, lest disappointment prove contagious. She had endured years of advice disguised as concern. Lower your expectations. Wear darker colors. Consider a widower. Be grateful for invitations. Do not seem eager. Do not seem sad. Do not seem as though you have noticed what everyone sees. Tonight, she would endure again. Across the room, Lady Portia turned her head and found Honoria standing alone. Her smile did not change, but the message in her eyes was clear. Stay there. Do not interfere. Do not remind anyone that time can touch Cecily too. Honoria lowered her glass to the table and smoothed her gloves. The repaired seam pressed faintly against her thumb. The gesture drew her thoughts back to the missing letter, and with it came a quiet unease that had followed her from the morning room into the carriage and now into Lady Renwick's candlelight. A solicitor did not write without cause. Not to a woman like Honoria, whose legal affairs were supposedly simple, modest, and safely managed by those who considered her incapable of managing anything beyond embroidery and correspondence. Aunt, Cecily whispered nearby, not softly enough. If His Grace truly comes, where should I stand? Lady Portia guided her closer to the line of sight from the entrance. Near the central candles. They flatter your complexion. Do not approach him first. Let him believe he has discovered you. And Cousin Honoria must not be encouraged to speak. Cecily gave a nervous little laugh. She won't, will she? Not if she remembers what is owed. The words were quiet. Too quiet for most of the room. Honoria heard them because she had been trained by necessity to hear the things people hoped she would miss. What is owed? Not gratitude. Not duty. Something else lay beneath it. Money, perhaps. The missing solicitor letter seemed suddenly less like an accident and more like a covered candle, extinguished before it could show the room too much. Then the butler's voice rose at the door, and the assembly changed shape. His Grace, the Duke of Aldermere. It was remarkable how quickly music could continue and still sound interrupted. No violin missed a note, no dancer stumbled, no glass fell from a hand, yet the room drew itself inward around the name. Conversations thinned. Mothers straightened. Daughters softened their mouths and sharpened their eyes. Gentlemen made space without appearing to move. Honoria looked toward the entrance despite herself. Benedict Aveling, Duke of Aldermere, did not enter like a man seeking admiration. He entered like a man accustomed to consequence. He was tall, dark-haired, and dressed with severe perfection, his evening coat cut plainly enough to make ornament seem unnecessary. His face was not handsome in the easy way that made girls sigh. It was stronger than that, controlled and unreadable, with a stillness that suggested both discipline and danger. He greeted Lady Renwick with a bow of exact respect, then lifted his gaze to the room. Half of London appeared to breathe in. Lady Portia moved at once, not visibly, not crudely, but with a slight turn that placed Cecily in a pool of flattering candlelight. Cecily looked down, then up, then away, a practiced sequence of innocence. Honoria almost admired the choreography. The Duke's gaze passed over Cecily. It paused nowhere. Not on the pink ribbons. Not on the white muslin. Not on the pretty expectation that had been arranged for his benefit. His attention moved through the room with the patience of a man who had learned that the most important truths were rarely standing in the center. Honoria realized too late that she was watching him. She lowered her eyes to the refreshment table. A foolish instinct. She was not a girl. She had no reason to feel caught. Still, a sensation moved over her skin, not warmth, not fear, but the strange awareness of being looked at without being dismissed. When she glanced up again, the Duke of Aldermere was looking directly at her. Not at her gown. Not at her age. At her. Then, more curiously, at her hands. Honoria resisted the impulse to hide the mended glove in the folds of her skirt. She had hidden enough things. Let him see the scene if he wished. Let him see that not everything old had fallen apart. Lady Portia noticed the direction of his gaze, and for the first time that evening, uncertainty touched her face. It vanished almost immediately. She leaned close to Cecily and murmured, "Now. Not too much. Let him see you smile." Cecily stepped forward just as two matrons angled their way toward the Duke, each armed with a daughter and a compliment. His Grace accepted the introductions with cool courtesy. He bowed when required. He spoke little. His attention returned, once, to Honoria's glove. The room saw only a Duke scanning society. Honoria saw something else. A question. It unsettled her more than mockery had. Mockery had shape. It could be survived by standing still. A question required an answer, and Honoria had spent half her life making sure no one asked her the right one. Lady Portia's voice reached her again, sweet as sugared tea. "Honoria, my dear, do come here a moment. Cecily requires your advice." Several women turned at the sound. Cecily's smile brightened with unease. The Duke's head shifted slightly, just enough to suggest he had heard. Honoria placed her untouched lemonade on the table. She walked toward them with her back straight, her mended hands quiet at her sides, and the uneasy certainty that whatever Lady Portia intended, it was no kindness. Honoria felt the rumor just as she crossed it. Not openly. Society was too well trained for open cruelty when music was playing and candles were expensive. Yet attention had weight. It gathered first at her shoulders, then at the mended glove, then at the calm expression she had arranged upon her face before leaving the refreshment table. Lady Portia stood beside a low arrangement of white roses, her smile gracious enough to deceive anyone who had never depended upon her mercy. Cecily waited with her eyes bright and her mouth soft, a picture of youthful helplessness framed for admiration. Around them lingered several women of rank and appetite, the kind who pretended to dislike gossip while making room for it with their fans. Lady Renwick was not among them, but Honoria sensed the older woman's attention from across the room. More dangerously, she knew the Duke of Aldermere had not entirely turned away. "There you are, my dear," Lady Portia said, as though Honoria had been summoned for kindness. "Cecily has been anxious about making the most of her first season. I told her no one could advise her better than a lady who has observed so many." A delicate pause followed. Someone coughed behind a fan. Cecily lowered her lashes. "I'm sure Cousin Honoria knows everything one must avoid." Honoria stopped beside them, neither too near nor too far. "Experience can be useful," she said, "if one has learned from it." "Precisely." Lady Portia's smile widened by the smallest degree. "Do tell Cecily what a young lady must do if she wishes not to waste her opportunities." The word waste was placed gently. That made it worse. Honoria looked at Cecily, who was pretty, nervous, and cruel in the unsteady way of someone still learning where to aim. For one moment, Honoria almost pitied her. A girl raised by Lady Portia would be taught that marriage was a battlefield and other women were furniture to be pushed aside. She must begin, Honoria said, by understanding that a gentleman worth accepting is not a prize to be captured, but a character to be judged. A stillness passed through the circle. It was not the answer desired. Cecily blinked. Lady Portia's fingers tightened around the stem of her fan. "How philosophical," she said. "And yet philosophy has never filled a dance card." "Nor has vanity kept one full after supper," Honoria replied. The words were quiet. They travelled anyway. A lady in green silk looked down to hide a smile. Cecily flushed, and the flush made her prettier, which seemed to irritate her because it did nothing to restore her advantage. "I only meant," Cecily said, forcing a laugh, "that Cousin Honoria must know how easily one may be overlooked. It would be foolish not to learn from that." Lady Portia touched Cecily's arm as if to restrain her, though her eyes encouraged more. "Cecily, darling." "No, let me ask." Cecily turned toward Honoria with a brightness that had sharpened. "When gentlemen stop asking, is there a particular moment when one knows? Or does it happen slowly, until one simply finds oneself standing beside the lemonade?" The circle held its breath politely. Honoria heard the first whisper behind her. Then another. She kept her gaze steady. "It happens," she said, "when one begins measuring women by invitations instead of integrity." Cecily's smile faltered. Lady Portia stepped in, smooth as a blade sliding back into its sheath. "My dear Honoria, you must forgive her? Young girls speak carelessly because they still have hope." There it was. Not an insult shouted across a room. Not a scandal. Only a small, precise pin pushed beneath the skin where no one could accuse the hand that held it. Honoria felt the old humiliation rise, familiar and hot, but she would not give Lady Portia the satisfaction of seeing it. "Hope is not a fault," she said. "No," Lady Portia answered. "Not in the young." A few women smiled. Cecily, encouraged by the sound, reached toward Honoria's hand. "Oh, But look, Aunt. She has mended them again. Honoria drew back, but not quickly enough without seeming rude. Cecily's gloved fingers caught the edge of the pearl grey kid leather at Honoria's wrist and lifted it as if showing a curiosity at a fair. The repaired seam lay visible beneath the candlelight. Fine, careful stitches. Too careful. Too old. Cecily, Honoria said softly. Release my hand. I'm only admiring your thrift, Cecily said. It's very admirable, isn't it? So practical. The ink came from Cecily's fingers. Honoria noticed it only because Cecily's glove had a faint dark smudge near the thumb, a mark hidden until she touched the pale leather. A small stain transferred to Honoria's torn seam. Blue-black. Fresh. For some reason, the sight chilled her more than the laughter gathering at the edge of the circle. Enough, Honoria said. It was still quiet, but something in it made Cecily's smile stiffen. She let go too quickly. The old stitches caught against a pearl bead on Cecily's bracelet and gave way with a soft, unmistakable rip. It was not loud. It did not need to be. The sound seemed to reach every ear already prepared to enjoy it. Honoria's glove opened along the seam, exposing the side of her hand. A small thing. A ruined glove. Nothing more. Yet the room blurred for one dangerous second because the tear felt like all of it at once. Every season she had been displayed and dismissed. Every smile offered to men who looked past her. Every practical economy hidden beneath lace. Every year of making herself acceptable enough not to embarrass people who were already embarrassed by her existence. Cecily gasped. Oh, cousin, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Lady Portia's voice arrived softly, perfectly placed for the circle and not the whole room. No one is blaming you, Cecily. Such things happen when old material is expected to endure another season. A murmur of amusement moved through the ladies. Honoria lowered her hand. She would not hide it. Not now. Lady Portia leaned nearer, her perfume sweet and suffocating. Perhaps this is a mercy, my dear. A woman must know when certain things are beyond repair. Honoria looked at her. Some things, yes. Indeed. Lady Portia's eyes glittered. No gentleman asks for a hand he has watched go unclaimed for 20 years. The words should have remained in a circle. They did not. They carried outward through a dip in the music, through a gap in laughter, through the listening hunger of a room that loved cruelty most when it sounded like wit. One by one, faces turned. Cecily went pale, as if she had not expected her aunt to push so far. Honoria stood very still. She felt the air press against her. A laugh came from somewhere near the card room, then died before it could grow. Her hand remained bare at the torn seam. She could feel the cool air on her skin. She could also feel the old instinct to fold, to smile, to make the moment easier for everyone else. She did not. Cruelty, Honoria said, each word clear enough for the nearest listeners to hear, does not become kindness because it is spoken softly. Lady Portia's face hardened. The circle tightened. Then a man's voice cut through the silence behind them. No, it said. It does not. The room changed again, but this time the change came with authority. Honoria turned. The Duke of Aldermere stood a few paces away, his expression colder than any anger she had ever seen. He did not look at Lady Portia first. He looked at the torn glove, then at Cecily's ink-marked fingers, then at Honoria's face. That order mattered. He saw the evidence before he judged the wound. He stepped forward. No one blocked him. Dukes were not blocked in London drawing rooms, not by ladies with fans and certainly not by women who suddenly remembered they had spoken too loudly. Benedict bent and retrieved the loosened strip of pearl grey leather that had fallen near Honoria's skirt. The gesture was small. It felt impossibly large. He held it not as a scrap, but as something belonging to a lady whose dignity had been mishandled in public. Lady Honoria, he said, bowing over the torn glove. I believe this is yours. She accepted it because refusing would have made her tremble. His fingers did not touch hers, yet the space between them seemed warmer than the crowded room. Thank you, Your Grace. Lady Portia recovered first. Your Grace, you are very kind. A family jest, nothing more. My niece is sensitive to these things. I have observed, he said. His gaze moved to Portia. But I do not think Lady Honoria is the one whose sensitivity concerns me. A tiny sound passed through the room. Not laughter. Shock. Cecily's eyes filled with frightened brightness. I didn't mean to tear it, Your Grace. Benedict looked at her ink-smudged thumb, then away. Intent is often less revealing than conduct, Miss Vale. Cecily lowered her hand at once. Lady Portia drew herself up. Surely Your Grace does not intend to make an incident of a glove. No, he said. You have already done so. Silence. Complete, polished, magnificent silence. Honoria forgot to breathe. Benedict turned back to her, and the coldness in his face altered. It did not soften entirely. It became careful. Respectful. Lady Honoria, he said, his voice carrying just far enough, may I have your hand for the next dance? For one suspended moment, she thought she had misunderstood. The room had not. Every eye fixed upon them. Lady Portia's fan stopped moving. Cecily's lips parted. The musicians at the far end seemed to hesitate before finding the next measure. Honoria looked at the Duke's offered hand. A hand ungloved in places. A mended glove torn open. A room full of people waiting to see whether she would shrink from the very thing used to shame her. She placed her hand in his. Not because she had been rescued. Because she had not retreated. His fingers closed with restrained steadiness, neither possessive nor hesitant. Your Grace, she said, I would be honored. As he led her toward the floor, the crowd parted with the obedience rank commanded and conscience rarely received. Honoria felt whispers rising behind her, but they no longer struck her back. They fell away, useless as pins against glass. The Duke stopped at the opening of the set and turned to face her. Up close, his eyes were darker than she had realized, and far more watchful. London has been blind, Lady Honoria, he said quietly, as the first notes began. I dislike blindness when it calls itself judgment. Honoria lifted her chin, her torn glove resting in his hand before the room that had laughed at it. Then I hope Your Grace has excellent sight. His mouth did not smile, but something in his gaze shifted. Tonight, he said, I intend to use it. The dance did not begin as a rescue. That was the first thing Honoria understood once the Duke of Aldermere took his place before her and the figures opened around them. Rescue would have been hurried. Rescue would have apologized with its eyes, as if her torn glove were a stain he wished to cover before anyone noticed further. His Grace did neither. He gave her the courtesy of a formal bow, exact and unashamed, then offered his hand as though she wore diamonds instead of torn pearl-grey leather. The room had not recovered. Honoria felt every gaze in Lady Rennick's assembly follow the movement of her hand into his. She heard the music resume, too bright at first, then steadier as the musicians remembered themselves. She stepped forward on the measure. Her glove gaped at the seam. Benedict saw it. He did not look away. You dance very well, Lady Honoria, he said. You sound surprised, Your Grace. I am relieved. She looked up before she could stop herself. Relieved? If you had danced poorly, London would have called my judgment noble but misguided. Since you dance well, they must settle for being confused. It was so dryly said that Honoria nearly smiled. Nearly. I fear confusion is not a heavy punishment. For people accustomed to thinking themselves clever, it can be severe. They turned through the figure, separated, and came together again beneath a blaze of candlelight. The set required movement, not intimacy, yet every return to him seemed oddly private because he never allowed the watching room to enter his expression. He did not ask whether she was wounded. He did not tell her not to mind them. Those were phrases people offered when they wished pain to become tidy for their convenience. Instead, he gave her space to stand upright inside it. That unsettled her more than flattery would have done. Across the room, Lady Portia had recovered enough to speak with Mrs. Anstruther, whose eldest daughter had been guided directly away from the Duke's path only 10 minutes earlier. Cecily stood beside her aunt, pale around the mouth, her ink-marked thumb tucked hard into her palm. Honoria noticed. So did Benedict. His gaze flicked once toward the girl's hidden hand and returned to Honoria. Miss Vale had been writing earlier, he asked quietly. The question was so unexpected that Honoria missed half a step. He corrected with perfect ease, guiding the turn without appearing to guide her at all. I beg your pardon. Ink transfers only when it is fresh. He lowered his voice further. Your glove was marked before it tore. Honoria's heart gave a small, sharp beat. You observed a great deal from across the room. I have found that loud rooms are useful. People mistake noise for privacy. Then your Grace must know London very well. Well enough to distrust it. The answer should have comforted her. It did not. It made her aware that he had not acted out of impulse alone. He had seen. He had measured. He had chosen his moment with precision. A foolish little part of her, the part she had tried to bury inside the walnut box at home, wished for one instant that he had simply seen her and cared. She hated that part. It was not dead after all. You need not continue this performance beyond the set, she said when they passed near enough to speak again. You have made your point. Lady Portia will think twice before amusing herself at my expense. Will she? His eyes moved briefly to Lady Portia. I doubt that. The certainty in his voice chilled Honoria because it matched her own. Then let us say you have made the room think twice. That is a beginning, not an end. The dance carried them apart before she could answer. When they came together again, the first set was nearing its close, and Honoria became painfully aware of what would happen when the music stopped. There would be curtsies. There would be murmurs. Lady Portia would sweep forward and wrap the incident in family explanation. Cecily would look young enough to be forgiven. Honoria would be expected to make the humiliation smaller by smiling. Benedict seemed to read the knowledge in her face. Lady Honoria, he said, when the dance ends, I will ask Lady Renwick for permission to speak with you under her eye. You may refuse. May I? You may refuse anything I ask. The simplicity of it struck her harder than any grand declaration could have done. She had spent years being told what she owed. Gratitude. Silence. Usefulness. A willingness not to inconvenience those who found her life embarrassing. Permission felt unfamiliar. And what does your Grace intend to ask? A question that should not be asked in the middle of a country dance. How prudent. Not always. Only when prudence serves honor. The music ended. Applause rose, thin and uncertain, then strengthened as the room realized applause was safer than silence. Honoria curtsied. Benedict bowed. He did not release her at once. Not improperly. Only long enough to say, do not let them hurry you. Then he stepped back and turned to Lady Renwick, who had appeared near the edge of the floor with the timing of a woman who had governed drawing rooms for 40 years and missed nothing worth seeing. Lady Renwick, he said, may I impose upon your kindness for a few minutes of properly supervised conversation with Lady Honoria? Lady Renwick's eyes brightened. Your Grace, propriety is my dearest tyrant. I shall be delighted to indulge it. She led them to a small alcove still visible from the room, near enough to satisfy every rule and far enough to deprive the curious of clear hearing. Honoria sat because Lady Renwick indicated the chair. Benedict remained standing until both women were settled, then took the seat opposite. The gesture was ordinary. It steadied her. Lady Portia had begun moving toward them, but Lady Renwick intercepted her with a lift of her fan and the terrifying sweetness of an old hostess. Lady Portia, do assist me by assuring Mrs. Anstruther that the lemon syllabub has not curdled. She looks ready to accuse my cook before witnesses. Lady Portia stopped. She smiled because she had no choice. Benedict waited until she withdrew. Then he looked at Honoria, not gently, not coldly, but with a seriousness that made the candlelit room seem less frivolous. Lady Honoria, I wish to call upon you tomorrow. Honoria had expected thanks, apology, perhaps some formal condemnation of Lady Portia's behavior. She had not expected her breath to catch. A morning call? Yes. That would be noticed. It is intended to be noticed. Lady Renwick's fan stilled in her lap. Honoria kept her hands folded, torn glove beneath whole one. Your Grace, you have already defended me generously. You need not attach your consequence to my embarrassment. I am not generous with consequence. His answer came at once. Nor careless with my name. Then why? Because tonight a room full of people watched a lady insulted for having gone unchosen, and I found myself wondering by what defect of judgment London had mistaken neglect for evidence. Honoria looked away. The words touched too near. London has many defects. One cannot marry them all into correction. No. One can only begin with one truth. And what truth is that? That I would like permission to know you. Her fingers tightened around the ruined glove. To know me. Formally. Publicly. With your consent and Lady Rennick's awareness. If continued acquaintance proves welcome to you, I would court you with marriage as an honest possible end, not as a theatrical gesture and not as reparation for what was said tonight. The world seemed to draw back from her. Music, voices, candlelight, silk. All of it blurred around that single impossible sentence. Marriage as an honest possible end. At 18, she might have blushed. At 25, she might have hoped. At 30, she might have wept later in private. At 40, she knew too much about rooms and motives to accept miracles before examining their seams. Your Grace, she said carefully, pity can look very noble when it wears a coronet. Lady Rennick's brows rose, but she said nothing. Benedict did not appear offended. If anything, he looked more intent. It can. This is not pity. It was born in a room where I was shamed. It was born before that. Honoria stilled. Before. When you stood at the edge of the room and listened to insults without becoming smaller. When you answered cruelty with sense. When you let a careless girl expose a wound and still did not strike back with one of your own. Tonight did not create my respect, Lady Honoria. It revealed the cost of what others have failed to give you. There was silence. Not empty silence. Dangerous silence. The sort in which hope, if one was not vigilant, might lift its head. Honoria forced herself to breathe. I am 40. I am aware. I have no dowry worth a duke's notice. I did not ask for your account books. I am not practiced in being adored. A faint change moved across his mouth, not quite a smile. Then I shall not begin there. I ask only to call. And if I permit it, then before this evening ends, I will send a formal card to Vale House. Tomorrow, I will arrive at a respectable hour. Lady Portia may observe what propriety demands, but she will not define what I mean. Honoria looked toward the room. Lady Portia was watching despite Lady Rennick's efforts. Cecily had ceased pretending not to cry. A dozen women were pretending not to stare. If I agree, they will say I trapped you. They are already saying less intelligent things. That does not trouble you. Very little that is false troubles me. What troubles me is how often falsehood goes unanswered. Lady Rennick gave a soft hum of approval. Honoria almost laughed, but the sound would have broken something too fragile. She looked back at Benedict. You may call, Your Grace. His gaze held hers. Thank you. But you must understand me. I will not be made into your charitable act. No, and you must never confuse rescue with respect. This time, the faint smile reached his eyes. I will endeavor not to insult either of us so badly. Honoria inclined her head. Then we understand one another. Not yet, he said. But I hope we shall. Less than an hour later, as Lady Portia's carriage carried them home through the dark, no one spoke. Cecily's eyes were swollen. Lady Portia's profile looked carved from pale stone. Honoria sat with the torn glove folded in her lap and the Duke's formal card tucked inside her reticule, delivered before half the assembly could stop discussing it. She did not touch it. She did not trust herself. At Vale House, Lady Portia went directly to the small writing desk in the morning room while the others climbed the stairs. Honoria saw the movement from the landing. She saw the key turn. She saw Portia remove a cream-colored letter bearing the broken impression of a solicitor's seal. The same narrow hand from the morning tray marked the direction. Lady Honoria Vale. Portia held the letter over the candle until the edge blackened and curled. Then she pinched out the flame, leaving only the seal unburned in her palm. In the dimness above, Honoria stood without moving. The glove in her hand was torn. The Duke's card was real. And beneath Lady Portia's silence, something had begun to burn. Morning came to Vale House with the brittle neatness of a lie prepared before breakfast. The servants moved softly, Lady Portia descended early, and Honoria found no ash in the grate of the morning room, though she had watched the edge of the solicitor's letter curl black over the candle the night before. The grate had been swept. The desk had been locked. The house wore innocence as carefully as Cecily wore ribbons. Honoria said nothing at breakfast. She ate half a slice of toast, drank her tea without tasting it, and kept the Duke of Aldermere's card in the pocket of her morning gown like a small, impossible weight. Lady Portia presided from the head of the table in lavender silk, gracious and composed, with no trace of a woman who had burned another lady's correspondence less than 8 hours earlier. Cecily looked pale from the assembly, but her pallor had softened into a becoming fragility by the time the chocolate was poured. She had practiced wounded youth in the mirror. Honoria recognized the result. "His Grace will call at noon," Lady Portia said, as though she had arranged it. "Cecily, you will wear the blue muslin. It suggests delicacy without childishness." Cecily's spoon chimed against her cup. "But he's calling on Cousin Honoria." "His Grace is calling on this house," Lady Portia replied. "A wise girl understands the difference." Honoria lifted her eyes. "Does a wise woman?" The silence that followed was brief, but satisfying. Lady Portia smiled. "My dear, after last night, I should think wisdom would recommend humility." "After last night," Honoria said, "I find humility is often demanded by those who have misplaced their own." Cecily looked between them with a flash of alarm. Lady Portia laid her napkin beside her plate. "Take care. Attention can make a woman giddy when she is unaccustomed to it." Honoria touched the pocket where the card rested. "Then I shall sit down before I faint." The footman near the sideboard lowered his gaze too quickly. Honoria noticed. She had begun to notice everything. The missing letter. The swept grate. The ink on Cecily's glove. The footman's fear. At 5 minutes before noon, Vale House rearranged itself around expectation. The drawing room was opened, the best tea service brought out, and Cecily placed near the window where winter light softened her face. Honoria had not been offered the maid. She had dressed herself in a grey morning gown and repaired her hair without ornament. The torn pearl grey glove lay folded in her reticule. She had considered leaving it upstairs. Instead, she carried it with her. Some witnesses were made of paper. Some were made of leather and thread. The butler announced the Duke at precisely noon. His Grace entered without haste, dressed in dark blue, his gloves spotless, his hat surrendered to the footman with the quiet habit of a man whose presence altered rooms before he spoke. Lady Portia rose with an expression of maternal welcome. Cecily stood beside her, lowered her eyes, then lifted them at the exact angle trained the night before. Benedict bowed first to Lady Portia because etiquette required it, then to Cecily, then to Honoria with a degree of attention that made Lady Portia's smile tighten. "Lady Portia." "Miss Vale." "Lady Honoria." "Your Grace," Lady Portia said, sweeping into welcome. "We are honored. After the little confusion of last evening, I hoped you would allow us to receive you quietly as friends." "I do not recall offering friendship," Benedict said. "But I accept tea." Cecily's lips parted. Honoria looked down before amusement betrayed her. Lady Portia recovered with admirable speed. "Of course." "Cecily, darling, pour for his Grace." "No sugar," Benedict said before Cecily could ask. "Thank you." Cecily flushed, as though even his preference had denied her something. Honoria took the chair opposite the Duke because Lady Portia had left it empty only to make refusal awkward. Benedict noticed the arrangement. His gaze moved once around the room and settled on her. "Lady Honoria, I trust you suffered no ill effects from the assembly." "None. That sleep did not improve, Your Grace." "I'm glad to hear it," he said. The contraction sat naturally in his voice, not careless, but human. London can be exhausting when it believes itself entertained. Lady Portia laughed too lightly. "How severe, Your Grace." surely no one meant harm. Young people are careless, and family jests can appear harsher to strangers. Then it is fortunate I was not a stranger to what I saw. The cup in Cecily's hand trembled. A drop of tea touched the saucer. Lady Portia's eyes sharpened, but her voice remained warm. You are very protective for so new an acquaintance. Protection is not reserved for old acquaintance when discourtesy is public. Honoria felt the words land in the room, clear and exact. They should have comforted her. They did. Yet beneath that comfort moved another unease, because the missing solicitor's letter seemed to hover at Lady Portia's shoulder like smoke no sweeping could remove. Benedict set his cup down. Lady Honoria, before we speak further, I must ask you an uncomfortable question. Lady Portia's expression brightened with interest disguised as concern. How dramatic, Your Grace. Benedict did not look at her. From the inner pocket of his coat, he drew a folded note. It was cream-colored, sealed, and addressed in a hand that made Honoria's stomach turn cold. Her own name did not appear on the outside. His did. This arrived at Aldermere House shortly after midnight, he said. It claims to be from you. The room narrowed. Honoria heard the clock ticking on the mantel. From me? Yes. He held it out, but not in accusation. I would like you to read it before I ask anything more. Honoria took the paper. Her fingers remained steady because pride demanded obedience from the body when the heart rebelled. The hand was close to hers. Too close. The slope of the letters, the spacing, the careful loops. Someone had studied her correspondence. Someone in this house had seen enough of her hand to imitate it. She read the words once. Then again. Your Grace, I beg you to preserve what little reputation remains to me after this evening. If you do not continue your attentions, I shall be ruined beyond repair. I know I am not young. I know I have no claim on admiration. But if there is any honor in you, let it be used to shelter me now. Yours in desperate gratitude, Honoria Vale. The name blurred. Not because she wept. Because anger, when held too tightly, could briefly become white heat. Well? Lady Portia asked softly. My dear, did you write in agitation? It would be understandable after such an overwhelming night. Honoria looked at her. The calm on Lady Portia's face was worse than guilt. It was confidence. No, Cecily pressed her hands together. Maybe you forgot. You were very upset. I wasn't upset enough to forget my own humiliation, Honoria said. Nor am I in the habit of begging strangers to manufacture honor on my behalf. Benedict's gaze did not leave her face. You did not write it. I didn't write it, Your Grace. You are certain? I have been uncertain of many things in my life. My own desperation is not one of them. Something changed in his eyes. Respect, perhaps. Or relief held carefully in check. Lady Portia leaned forward with a sigh. Honoria, pride will not help us if this becomes known. His Grace is giving you the chance to be honest. Benedict turned his head. No, Lady Portia. I am giving her the chance to answer without your interpretation. The word struck like a closed door. Portia colored. Cecily looked at the note with a fear that came and went too quickly. Honoria saw it. Benedict saw that she saw. He took the paper back and examined it. There is one curious thing, he said. Aldermere is misspelled in the second line. Cecily's lashes flickered. Is it? Her voice was too high. A common mistake, Lady Portia said. Not in a note supposedly written by a lady who received my card last night. Benedict folded the letter. Nor by a woman careful enough to mend a glove with nearly invisible stitches. Honoria felt the room breathe in. It was not praise exactly, but it reached something tender and defended it before anyone could mock it. Your Grace, Lady Portia said, surely you do not mean to imply some mischief within this household. I mean to imply nothing yet. Benedict placed the note inside his coat. But a lady's honor is not destroyed by a sheet of paper I did not see her write. Honoria looked at him then. Fully. For the first time that morning, she allowed herself to believe that he had not come to test whether she was pathetic. He had come to test the lie. "Thank you," she said. The words were simple. They cost more than she expected. Lady Portia rose, forcing everyone else into motion. "Then we shall say no more of this disagreeable matter. Cecily, ring for fresh tea. His Grace must not leave us with such a sombre impression." "I will leave with the impression I have formed," Benedict said. "Fresh tea will not alter it." He bowed a few minutes later, first to Lady Portia, then Cecily, then Honoria. At the door, he paused just long enough to say, "Lady Honoria, I hope you will permit me the honor of driving in Hyde Park tomorrow, properly accompanied." Lady Portia inhaled. Cecily went still. Honoria felt the forged note burn invisibly between them all. "I will permit it, Your Grace," she said. His bow was grave. "Then tomorrow may prove more honest than today." By evening, honesty had already been outpaced. The scandal sheet arrived folded beneath Lady Portia's correspondence, then opened in 3 drawing-rooms before supper and a dozen more before midnight. By candlelight, in black ink meant to be laughed over by all of Mayfair, Honoria read the line that turned her private wound into public entertainment. "A desperate lady of 40 begs a duke to save what no gentleman ever sought." By 11 o'clock the next morning, the scandal sheet had travelled farther than any truth in London. It lay on breakfast tables, beneath embroidery baskets, beside cups of chocolate, and in the eager hands of women who claimed they never read such wicked things except to know what ought to be condemned. In Vale House, Lady Portia read the offending paragraph aloud with the trembling dignity of a martyr and the eyes of a woman watching for blood. Honoria sat opposite her, wearing a plain walking gown and no gloves at all. The torn pearl-grey pair rested in her reticule, folded around the small blue-black stain Cecily had left upon the seam. She had spent half the night resisting the urge to scrub it clean. By morning, she understood that some stains were meant to remain until they could speak. "A desperate lady of 40, Lady Portia repeated, lowering the paper as if the words had wounded her personally. "How cruel! How very cruel! I cannot imagine who would have given them such a thing." Cecily stared down at her plate. Her cheeks were pale, but the pallor no longer looked pretty. It looked frightened. Honoria watched her cousin's hands. They were gloved this morning, though breakfast required no such costume. "Perhaps," Honoria said, "the person who sent the note also sent the copy." Lady Portia's gaze lifted. "Accusation is unbecoming when one lacks proof. So is pity when one is enjoying oneself." Cecily's spoon struck porcelain. Lady Portia folded the scandal sheet with great care. "His Grace will withdraw after this. No man of consequence attaches himself to ridicule unless he has lost his senses." Before Honoria could reply, the butler entered with a card upon a silver tray. His expression was carefully empty, but his hand shook just enough for the card to whisper against the metal. Lady Portia took it, read it, and went still. "His Grace requests the honour of taking Lady Honoria for a turn in Hyde Park at noon," the butler said, as though speaking the words might protect him from the silence that followed. "Lady Renwick's companion is waiting below to serve as chaperone, my lady. His Grace's carriage is at the door." Cecily looked up sharply. Lady Portia's fingers closed around the card until it bent. Honoria rose. She felt no triumph. Triumph would have been too simple. What she felt was steadiness, fragile but real, like a candle guarded by cupped hands. "I should not keep His Grace waiting," she said. Lady Portia's smile returned, thinner than paper. "You will wear gloves." No, the single word settled over the table. Cecily blinked. Lady Portia's eyes hardened. "You forget yourself." "No," Honoria said. "I remembered." She left before Lady Portia could decide whether a scene would serve her better than restraint. Outside, the Duke of Aldermere's carriage waited in sober dark green, its harness polished but not showy, its horses black and restless beneath the pale winter sun. Lady Renwick's companion, Mrs. Bell, sat already within, a respectable widow with a face that suggested she had survived too much nonsense to be impressed by any of it. Benedict stood beside the carriage, hat in hand. He looked first at Honoria's face, then at her bare hands. He did not frown. He did not ask whether she had forgotten propriety, though a lady without gloves in public was not quite correct. Instead, he opened the carriage door himself and said, "Lady Honoria, I'm honoured you came." The words were simple. They reached her more deeply than they should have. "Your Grace, London seems determined to discuss my hands. I thought I might as well bring them." Mrs. Bell gave a small cough that might have been amusement. Benedict's gaze warmed by a degree. "Then London will have the rare advantage of accuracy." He helped her into the carriage without pressing her fingers, and they set off toward Hyde Park with Mrs. Bell between propriety and possibility. The drive began under watchful windows. Honoria could feel faces at curtains along the square. She had expected the humiliation to press upon her once they turned into the larger streets, but the opposite happened. The more London looked, the less she wished to hide. At Hyde Park, the fashionable hour had not yet reached its fullest display, but the drive was already lined with carriages, riders, ladies with parasols, and gentlemen pretending not to stare while doing nothing else. Whispers moved faster than wheels. She saw heads turn toward the Duke's carriage. She saw one matron raise her lorgnette, then lower it when Benedict looked directly at her. "You have made yourself a target by being seen with me," Honoria said. "I was already a target. I am unmarried, rich, titled, and disinclined to be managed. London has never forgiven me for the combination." Despite herself, she smiled. "Then perhaps we are both guilty of disappointing it. I prefer to think of it as public service." The carriage slowed near a bend where several children sold violets and primroses from small baskets. A careless gentleman on horseback guided his mount too close to the curb, not dangerously, but thoughtlessly enough that one little flower girl stumbled back and dropped half her violets into the dust. No one in the nearest carriage moved. The gentleman laughed an apology toward no one in particular and rode on. Honoria acted before remembering she was being watched. "Please stop," she said. Benedict signaled at once. The carriage halted. "Mrs. Bell made a soft sound of approval as Honoria stepped down, gathering her skirts clear of the wheel. The child, no more than 8 years old, knelt among crushed stems, trying not to cry. Honoria crouched carefully and began gathering what could be saved. "There now," she said. "Not all is lost. See? These still have courage." The girl looked at her bare hand, then at her face. "My lady, you'll soil your fingers. They have survived worse than dust." Benedict had descended behind her. She sensed him rather than saw him. He did not interfere. He did not turn kindness into spectacle. He simply stood so that passing wheels gave her space and no one could hurry the child. Honoria placed the rescued violets back into the basket and drew a coin from her reticule. "For the damaged flowers as well." The girl's eyes widened. "Thank you, my lady." "No. Thank you for reminding me that crushed things may still be worth carrying." She rose then and found Benedict watching her with an expression she could not name. Not pity. Not admiration in the easy, decorative sense. Something quieter. Something that made her suddenly aware of the dust on her fingertips and the absence of gloves. "You could have let me send a footman," he said. "Yes. You didn't." "No, and may I ask why?" Honoria looked at the flower girl moving away with her basket held carefully in both hands. "Because I know what it is to be stepped around by people who believe their destination matters more than your fall." Benedict did not answer at once. When he did, his voice had changed. "I am sorry you know that. I am not asking you to be sorry. I know." That was the trouble. He seemed to know too many things without demanding that she explain them. They returned to the carriage. By then, more people were looking. A pair of ladies in a barouche whispered behind their gloves. A gentleman near Rotten Row bowed too low for sincerity. Benedict noticed all of it. When the carriage moved again, he leaned just enough for his voice to reach Honoria and Mrs. Bell, but not the park. "I received word this morning." The scandal sheet did not receive its copy from a gentleman's club or a careless servant gossiping in a kitchen. It came through a clerk who has carried printed notices for households in your street. Honoria's fingers tightened around her reticule. Vale House. That is the direction in which the road points. Roads can be disguised. Not forever. She looked toward the line of carriages and saw Cecily before Cecily saw her. Her cousin sat with Lady Portia in a hired barouche, wearing blue and looking less delicate now that anger had colored her face. Lady Portia's eyes moved from Benedict to Honoria's bare hands, then to the flower basket now resting beside Honoria on the carriage floor. Her smile appeared. It was not pleasant. "Lady Honoria," Cecily called as their carriages drew near, her voice sweet enough for the nearby occupants to hear. "How charitable you look. Is kindness the latest fashion for ladies with no other ornament?" The barb was light. Public. Carefully deniable. Honoria felt the old pressure to lower her eyes. Benedict spoke before she needed to decide whether to answer, but he did not answer for her. He addressed the nearest carriage first, where Lady Jersey's cousin sat watching with bright interest. "Lady Honoria has just done what many of us observed and failed to do. I am honored to be seen with a lady whose hand lifts where others merely point." The words traveled. Not loudly. Precisely. The nearby whispers changed pitch. Cecily went scarlet. Lady Portia bowed her head as if accepting a compliment that had not been offered. Honoria's throat tightened, but she kept her expression composed. "Your Grace gives more weight to a few violets than they deserve." "No," Benedict said. "I give weight to conduct." A footman stepped up at the next pause in the drive and presented a small parcel from the Duke's carriage box. Benedict opened it and withdrew a pair of new gloves, pearl grey kid, finer than any Honoria owned, plain enough not to insult the old ones by competing with them. "I took the liberty of bringing these," he said. "You may refuse them." Honoria looked at the gloves. Then at him. "Most people give gifts hoping to erase what came before. I brought them because your hands were made cold by other people's cruelty. Not because I object to seeing them." The honesty of it struck her still. She accepted one glove only, sliding it over her right hand. Her left remained bare in her lap, close to the reticule that held the torn one. "One will do for now." His eyes moved to her uncovered hand, then back to her face. "Then one shall do." For the first time since the scandal sheet had found its way into print, Honoria smiled without forcing it. It was small. It was cautious. It was real. Across the park, Lady Portia watched that smile as though it were a declaration of war. By the time Honoria returned to Vale House, the morning's drive had already begun to outrun the scandal. Some said the Duke had displayed extraordinary gallantry. Others said Lady Honoria had staged a sentimental performance with a flower girl. Lady Portia chose the version that suited her and read it aloud before dinner with wounded grace. Yet Honoria no longer heard only the insult. She heard the flaw beneath it. A forged note. A printer's clerk. A missing solicitor letter. An ink stain on a torn glove. The road did not yet reach the truth, but it had begun to point. By the following morning, the scandal had learned to dress itself as concern. The first sheet had been cruel enough, but the second was worse because it pretended to pity what it had been made to wound. It arrived folded into Lady Portia's correspondence before breakfast, passed from the butler's tray to her hand with the solemnity of an official notice. Honoria knew what it contained before the paper opened. She saw it in the quick brightness of Cecily's eyes, in the careful blankness of the footman near the sideboard, and in the faint satisfaction Lady Portia tried to conceal behind a breath of distress. Rain tapped softly against the windows, turning the Mayfair morning grey, but the breakfast room felt too warm. The fire was high. The silver shone. The toast sat untouched. Honoria wore the single new glove the Duke had given her on her right hand. Her left remained bare beneath the table, fingers resting against the reticule in her lap where the torn pearl grey glove lay folded around its ink stain. She had slept little. Not because of the insults. Insults were old companions. It was the pattern that had kept her awake. The missing solicitor letter. The forged note. The copy sent to the scandal sheet. The clerk near Vale House. Every road turned back to the same door. Lady Portia adjusted her spectacles, though she did not need them, and read aloud in a voice rich with sorrow. "It appears the lady in question has accepted a public drive from His Grace, perhaps mistaking gallantry for intention. One hopes, for her sake, that a heart long deprived of admiration has not begun to feed upon accident." Cecily looked down at her plate. A tiny smile moved and vanished. Lady Portia laid the paper beside the teapot. "I cannot bear to read more." "Then don't," Honoria said. The room went still. Lady Portia lifted her gaze. My dear. If the words pain you so much, don't read them aloud. Cecily's eyes widened. Lady Portia gave the kind of smile used to pardon children before punishing them. This affects the family, Honoria. Your choices affect us all. My choices. You allowed His Grace to parade you in Hyde Park after that unfortunate note. Surely you understand how it appears. Honoria's bare hand curled once against her reticule. I understand how someone wished it to appear. Accusations again. Lady Portia sighed. At your age, bitterness is more damaging than scandal. Honoria looked at her across the gleaming table. At any age, dishonesty is more damaging than both. Cecily stood too quickly, knocking her chair back a few inches. I don't have to sit here and listen to this. Sit down, Lady Portia said, not loudly. Cecily Saturday. That obedience told Honoria more than fear would have done. A knock came at the door before another word could pass. The butler entered with visible discomfort. His Grace, the Duke of Aldermere, asks whether Lady Honoria may receive him. Lady Renwick has sent Mrs. Bell to attend, should a chaperone be required. Lady Portia's hand tightened around the scandal sheet. At this hour. It is 11 o'clock, my lady. Show His Grace into the drawing-room, Honoria said. Lady Portia turned on her. You do not give orders in my house. Honoria rose. The movement was calm. That was what made it land. No. But I may receive a caller who has asked for me by name. She left the breakfast room before Lady Portia could turn dignity into a scene. In the drawing-room, Benedict stood near the mantel, hat in hand, his face composed with the kind of restraint that suggested anger had been locked behind iron. Mrs. Bell sat near the window, knitting with an expression of profound neutrality. Benedict bowed to Honoria when she entered. His gaze took in the single glove, the bare hand, and the tiredness she had failed to hide. Lady Honoria. Your Grace. Lady Portia and Cecily arrived just behind her, so swift that their attempt at dignity suffered. Portia's voice came smooth and cool. How kind of you to call, Your Grace. You find us in some distress. I know. Benedict placed a folded paper on the small table. I have seen the latest sheet. Cecily flinched at the word latest. Honoria saw Benedict notice it. Then you understand, Lady Portia said, why prudence must now govern sentiment. This cannot continue as a spectacle. For once, Lady Portia, we agree. Relief flickered across Portia's face. It vanished when Benedict turned to Honoria. I have come to offer an immediate betrothal announcement. The room seemed to lose its air. Honoria did not move. Lady Portia inhaled with triumph so quickly disguised as gratitude that it was almost impressive. Cecily stared as if the floor had shifted beneath her. An immediate betrothal, Honoria repeated. Yes. Benedict's voice was controlled, practical, too certain. A notice sent today to the proper papers. A call upon Lady Renwick and 2 or 3 families whose opinion governs the rest. A formal declaration will stop the speculation. It will make the forged note irrelevant and render the scandal sheet foolish rather than dangerous. Lady Portia clasped her hands. Your Grace, that is noble beyond expression. It is not noble, he said. It is necessary. The word struck Honoria harder than insult. Necessary. Not desired. Not chosen. Necessary. She felt, with terrible clarity, the trap kindness could become when power built it too quickly. Benedict was trying to protect her. She knew that. He looked at the scandal and saw a political fire requiring water before it reached the roof. But she was not a roof. She was not a house. She was not a reputation to be repaired before supper. Lady Honoria, he said more softly, perhaps seeing her face change, this will prevent further harm. To whom? He paused. To you. And to your name. My name can withstand gossip. Then why must it be used today? Lady Portia made a distressed sound. Honoria, don't be perverse. His Grace is offering you everything. Honoria did not look at her. No. His Grace is offering to solve me. Benedict's expression tightened. That is not my intention. Intent is often less revealing than conduct. I believe your Grace said something like that yesterday. Cecily's cheeks colored. Benedict absorbed the blow without defense. That almost made it worse. If he had been arrogant, refusal would have been easier. If he had been cold, she could have retreated behind anger. Instead, he stood before her trying to do right and getting the shape of it wrong. You are being publicly slandered, he said. Yes. The longer we wait, the more the lie will harden. Perhaps. A betrothal would silence them. It would silence me too. The words came out quietly. They filled the room. Mrs. Bell's knitting stopped. Lady Portia's eyes sharpened. Benedict went very still. Honoria drew the torn glove from her reticule and held it, not dramatically, only visibly. The old seam gaped. The ink stain remained at the wrist like a small dark witness. This began because someone thought my hand was a thing to be laughed at, she said. Then someone wrote words in my name to make that laughter useful. Now you ask for the same hand in haste, before truth is known, so London may be managed. His face altered. Pain moved there, quick and controlled. I ask because I will not watch you destroyed. And I refuse because I will not be preserved as evidence of your honor. Lady Portia stepped forward. You foolish woman. Benedict turned his head. Lady Portia. The warning in his voice stopped her, but Honoria had already heard enough. She looked at the woman who had fed her on humiliation for years and called it shelter. No, let her speak. She has said worse when fewer people were listening. Portia's color rose. You owe this family some consideration. I have given this family 20 years of consideration. Honoria folded the torn glove once, carefully. I shall keep what remains for myself. Benedict took one step toward her, then stopped, as if remembering that movement could become pressure. What do you want me to do? That question should have come first. It nearly undid her that it came now. Find the truth, she said. But do not marry me to bury the lie. And if the scandal worsens? Then it worsens with my consent intact. His jaw tightened. Lady Honoria. Your Grace, I will not become another paper you sign to settle a room. Silence fell. Beyond the windows, carriage wheels passed over wet stone. Inside, the rain sounded faint and steady, like time insisting upon itself. Benedict bowed his head, not in agreement exactly, but in recognition. I have wronged you. Lady Portia gave a sharp breath. Surely not. I was not speaking to you, he said. Honoria looked away before the dangerous warmth behind her eyes could show. I need air. Honoria, Lady Portia said. You will go nowhere in this state. I will go to Mrs. Sabine March on Half Moon Street. Cecily gasped. Aunt Sabine. She is respectable, widowed, and unlikely to read scandal aloud over breakfast. Lady Portia's mouth tightened. You will make yourself ridiculous. Honoria turned toward her. For once, she did not feel old. She felt finished with being managed by fear. No, Lady Portia. I believe I have been ridiculous only in imagining endurance would ever satisfy you. She rang for her maid with her own hand. It took less than an hour to pack what mattered. A grey gown. 2 books. Her mother's seed pearls. The walnut box of old dance cards, not because she cherished them now, but because they were hers to discard when she chose. The torn glove went into her reticule. The Duke remained below until the carriage was called, but he did not attempt to intercept her on the stairs. That restraint followed her more closely than any plea. At the front door, with Mrs. Bell waiting to accompany her as far as Half Moon Street, Honoria found Benedict standing beside the hall table. I will not follow unless you ask it, he said. Thank you. I will continue seeking the truth. Do that for justice, Your Grace. Not for possession. His eyes held hers. For justice, then. She stepped into the rain-washed morning, leaving Vale House behind her not as a rescued woman, not as a disgraced one, but as a woman who had finally chosen the direction of her own feet. Behind an upstairs curtain, Lady Portia watched her go. Honoria did not look back. Mrs. Sabine March lived on Half Moon Street in a house narrow enough to be overlooked and respectable enough to survive being overlooked. Its brick front had darkened with weather, its brass knocker was polished without vanity, and its windows held plain curtains that suggested a woman who had no patience for either display or neglect. Honoria arrived with Mrs. Bell, one maid, 2 small trunks, and a reticule containing a torn glove, a Duke's mistake, and the first clear breath she had taken in years. The rain had softened to mist by the time the carriage stopped. Honoria looked at the door and felt, absurdly, that she might be turned away. Not because Sabine was cruel. Cruelty would have been familiar. Kindness without bargaining was the thing that frightened her. The door opened before the footman could knock a second time. Mrs. Sabine March stood in the hall wearing black bombazine, a lace cap, and the expression of a woman who had outlived enough disappointments to stop pretending they were educational. She was Honoria's aunt by blood, her mother's younger sister, and the only relative who had never advised her to be grateful for being tolerated. "You are wet," Sabine said. "Yes." "You are pale." "Probably." "You have finally left Portia's house." Honoria's throat tightened. "For now." Sabine stepped aside. "Then don't stand on my step as if you're waiting to be voted upon." Mrs. Bell made a satisfied sound and took her leave once propriety had been safely delivered indoors. The maid carried the trunks upstairs. Honoria remained in the hall, aware of the quiet. It was not the smooth, listening quiet of Vale House, where every silence belonged to someone else. This quiet had furniture, dust, books, a faint smell of tea, and no hidden audience. Sabine led her into a small drawing room where a fire had already been lit. A tray waited on a low table. Not the best china for display. The comfortable cups. The ones people used when they intended to drink tea rather than perform it. "Sit," Sabine said. "Honoria Saturday, do I ask what happened, or do I pour first?" "Pour first, please." "Sensible." Sabine filled a cup, added no sugar because she remembered, and handed it over. That nearly undid Honoria more than sympathy would have done. To be remembered in small ways was a dangerous mercy. "Lady Portia will say I fled in a fit of temper," Honoria said. "I expect she will say worse by dinner." "Good. It will exercise her imagination." Honoria let out a sound that was too unsteady to be laughter. Sabine sat opposite her, watching with direct grey eyes. "Now. Did he insult you?" Honoria knew who he meant. "No, did he disappoint you?" The answer took longer. "Yes." Sabine nodded once, as if that distinction mattered. "That is often more painful." Honoria looked into her tea. He offered an immediate betrothal to silence the scandal. "Useful, powerful, and foolish." "I refused." "Excellent." Honoria looked up. Sabine's expression had not softened, but something in it had become warmer. "You do not think I was ungrateful?" "I think gratitude is a poor foundation for marriage and a worse excuse for surrender." The word settled into Honoria like warmth entering cold hands. She placed her reticule on her lap and opened it. The torn pearl grey glove lay inside, the old seam split, the dark ink mark visible near the wrist. Sabine leaned forward. "Ah." It tore at Lady Rennick's assembly. Cecily's bracelet caught the seam. Her fingers left this ink. Fresh. The Duke thought so. A useful man, then. Not useless. Merely mistaken. Honoria touched the ink stain lightly. There was also a forged note. It appeared to be in my hand. Then the same words found their way into a scandal sheet. "Portia. I cannot prove it. Yet." The word was short, sharp, and astonishingly kind. Honoria drew a breath. "There was a solicitor's letter yesterday morning. Addressed to me. It vanished before I could read it. Last night, I saw Lady Portia burn what looked like the same letter." Sabine's hand stilled over the teapot. "Your settlement?" "I do not know. I have been told for years that my quarterly payments were modest, delayed, or absorbed into household expenses." "And you believed them?" "I was encouraged to believe that asking questions was unbecoming." Sabine's face hardened. Many women have been robbed under that sentence. Honoria closed the reticule. I want to write to Mr. Lidgate myself. Your mother's solicitor? Yes. Then you shall write at my desk. Under your own hand. On my paper. With my footman carrying it, not Portia's. The simplicity of action felt almost violent after so many years of waiting for permission. Honoria followed Sabine to a small writing room at the back of the house. There were shelves of account books, letters tied in order, and a desk scarred by use rather than neglect. Sabine set out paper, ink, sealing wax, and a pen. No one hovered. No one corrected her posture. No one asked whether she was certain a lady should concern herself with such matters. Honoria Saturday. For a moment, she could not write. Her hand, bare now, rested on the blank page. It had been mocked, displayed, offered, nearly bargained away, and still it waited. Sabine stood by the window. What do you want, Honoria, when no one is arranging you? The question reached a place so quiet that even Honoria had rarely entered it. She thought of Vale House. Of Lady Portia's smile. Of Cecily's sharp little cruelties. Of Benedict asking too late what she wanted. Of the torn glove that had become an accusation against them all. I want the truth, she said. After that, Honoria dipped the pen. I want to decide what my life is worth before anyone else prices it. Sabine nodded. Begin there. Honoria wrote. Not dramatically. Not beautifully. Clearly. She asked Mr. Lidgate to confirm all correspondence sent to Vale House during the past year, the dates and amounts of her quarterly settlement payments, and whether any authority had been granted for Lady Portia to receive or redirect them. She requested copies under seal and asked that all future letters be sent to Mrs. Sabine March of Half Moon Street. When she finished, her hand ached, but it did not shake. Sabine sanded the page. There. That is what freedom looks like when it is still small enough to fit in an envelope. Honoria sealed it herself. Late that afternoon, while rain darkened the windows again, 2 messages arrived almost together. The first came from Vale House, delivered by a servant who looked relieved to leave it behind. Sabine broke the outer cover because it was addressed to her. Her mouth flattened as she read. Portia says you are in a state of nervous ingratitude, that you have misunderstood household matters, and that she is prepared to receive you back when you are ready to apologize. Honoria looked at the fire. The words did not surprise her. Their failure to command her did. No reply, she said. Sabine smiled faintly. That is often the most elegant one. The second message came without crest or flourish, carried by a groom in Aldermere livery who remained outside after delivering it. Sabine looked through the window. His Grace has sent a man to watch the street. Honoria rose. To watch me? To watch the door. There is a difference if the man keeps his distance. Honoria opened the note with care. The writing was firm, economical, and unmistakably his. Lady Honoria, I was wrong to offer a solution before asking what shape justice must take for you. I will not intrude upon Mrs. March's house. I will continue to seek the source of the forgery and the printed copy. If you require assistance, send one word. If you require my absence, I will honor that too. Aldermere. Honoria read it once. Then again. There was no plea in it. No defense. No wounded pride disguised as generosity. Only apology, action, and space. Sabine pretended not to watch her too closely. Well. He has learned one thing, Honoria said. Only one. That an apology is better when it does not ask to be praised. Sabine's eyes warmed. Promising. Honoria folded the letter and placed it beside the torn glove on the desk. One old witness. One new restraint. She did not answer the Duke. Not yet. Instead, she took out the pearl-grey glove and set it beneath a paperweight, ink stain upward, no longer hidden in silk or shame. By evening, Mr. Lidgate's reply arrived by special messenger, as if her letter had struck a bell long waiting to be rung. Honoria broke the seal with Sabine standing beside her. The first page was brief. Too brief. Lady Honoria, I have written thrice regarding the irregular receipts attached to your quarterly settlement. As no answer came from your hand, I feared my letters had been intercepted. Enclosed are copies. One signature resembles yours, but it is not yours. The room seemed to sharpen around her. Firelight. Paper. Rain. Sabine's hand settled on the back of Honoria's chair, steady and fierce. Honoria looked down at the copied receipt. The name was almost hers. Almost. But the H curved too high, and the final A in Honoria closed where hers always remained open. A lie had worn her name. This time, it had left a seam. The Duke of Aldermere waited on the pavement for 17 minutes before Mrs. Sabine March allowed him through the door. Honoria knew because the drawing-room clock had begun striking the quarter when his carriage stopped below, and the sound of his arrival had travelled through the narrow house with unusual clarity. Wheels on damp stone. A footman's knock. Sabine's calm voice in the hall. Then nothing. No immediate command. No titled man being hurried inside because the world had taught him doors opened when his name approached them. Only waiting. Honoria stood beside the writing desk with Mr. Lidgate's copied receipt in her hand and the torn pearl grey glove beneath the paperweight before her. The false signature looked worse in daylight. It had the arrogance of imitation, all shape and no soul. Someone had practiced her name until it could steal from her without trembling. He is still outside? Honoria asked. Sabine, seated by the window with her knitting untouched in her lap, lifted one curtain edge. Yes. In the rain. A drizzle. It will not drown him. Honoria looked down at the receipt again. You enjoy this? I enjoy very little before luncheon. But I approve of a powerful man discovering that patience is not fatal. A reluctant breath escaped Honoria, almost a laugh. It steadied her. During the night, she had read Mr. Lidgate's letter 5 times. 3 letters intercepted. 2 quarterly payments signed away on false receipts. 1 forged note sent to a duke. A public scandal made from private theft. The shape of the scheme had begun to emerge, yet the pain of it remained oddly simple. Portia had not merely taken money. She had taken Honoria's right to know the facts of her own life. That theft had lasted longer than any printed insult. Will you receive him? Sabine asked. Honoria folded the receipt. Yes. But not alone. I had no intention of losing my usefulness so early in the drama. Sabine rose and rang. A moment later, the maid opened the door and received instructions to admit His Grace to the drawing-room. When Benedict entered, he brought the smell of rain and cold air with him. He had removed his hat, and a few drops darkened the shoulders of his coat. He bowed first to Sabine, then to Honoria. The order was proper. His expression was controlled, but his eyes went at once to the papers on the desk, then to the glove beneath the paperweight, then to Honoria's bare left hand. He noticed everything. Today that did not feel like judgment. It felt like witness. Mrs. March, he said. Thank you for receiving me. I received you after considering it, Sabine replied. Gratitude may be adjusted accordingly. A faint movement touched his mouth. Then I am proportionately grateful. Sabine pointed with one knitting needle toward the chair opposite Honoria. Sit, Your Grace. Standing about like a monument will not improve your apology. Benedict Saturday. Honoria remained standing for one moment longer, then chose the chair near the desk rather than the sofa. It placed the evidence within reach. It also reminded her that she had not been summoned into this conversation. She had allowed it. Lady Honoria, Benedict said, I owe you an apology without argument attached to it. The directness made her still. That is an uncommon variety. It should not be. No, I treated the scandal as if speed were the same as care. I saw danger moving toward you and thought first of how to stop it. I did not ask what price my method would demand from you. Honoria watched him carefully. And what do you think the price would have been? Your voice. He did not look away. You're right to say that you had been wronged before I made myself the answer to the wrong. The room became very quiet. Even Sabine's needles remained still. Honoria had expected regret. She had expected perhaps pride disguised as concern. She had not expected understanding so plain that it left her no shield but truth. You would have silenced the lie, she said. Yes. But you would also have buried the evidence under your name. Yes. And me under gratitude. Pain moved through his face, carefully contained. Yes. Honoria looked toward the window. The rain drew silver lines down the glass. I wanted to accept for one terrible moment. Benedict's hand tightened once on the arm of his chair. Because you wanted the marriage. Because I was tired. The admission fell softly, but it felt immense. Tired of being watched. Tired of measuring every breath against what others might say. Tired of being made ridiculous by people who have never paid the cost of restraint. That is not shameful. It would have become shame if I had let exhaustion choose for me. He bowed his head. I am grateful you did not. Are you? I am ashamed that you had to refuse me in order to remind me who you were. The words touched her more deeply than a declaration would have done. She rose then and took the copied receipt from the desk. Mr. Lidgate sent this last night. Benedict accepted it only after she offered it. He read quickly, his expression darkening with each line. False receipts. 2 confirmed. Perhaps more. And his previous letters were intercepted. 3 of them. Lady Portia. Almost certainly. But almost is not enough. No, he said. It is not. Sabine leaned back. A rare pleasure. People agreeing with me before I have to correct them. Benedict placed the receipt back on the desk. I have found the printer's clerk who carried the copy of the forged note to the scandal sheet. He will not yet name the person who paid him, but he admits the packet came through a maid connected with Vale House. Honoria felt the next step appear before her like a bridge in mist. Not safe. Necessary. Portia will deny it. Yes. She will say servants gossip, clerks lie, and I invented the rest because I am bitter. Yes. She will try to make me look unstable. She already has. The answer was too swift to be comforting, but not cruel. Benedict drew a folded card from his coat. Lady Rennick has invited a small dinner tomorrow. Lady Portia encouraged it, I believe, thinking she can control the room and present you as ungrateful or greedy. She does not know Lady Rennick has already asked Mrs. Bell to attend, nor that the printer's clerk can be brought afterward if required. Sabine's brows lifted. Lady Rennick has teeth after all. Very sharp ones, Benedict said. Honoria looked at the invitation. It was a battlefield written on cream paper. Her name had been included in a hand not Portia's. That mattered. You want me to attend? I want you to choose whether to attend. He paused. If you do, I will be there. If you do not, I will pursue the evidence without placing you in that room. And if I attend, you will let me speak. His eyes returned to hers. Yes. Even if Portia insults me. Yes. Even if the room believes her at first. The answer took the smallest fraction longer. Yes. Even if you think you could end it faster by speaking over me. This time, the silence mattered. Benedict looked at the glove under the paperweight. Then at the false signature. Then at her. Especially then. Something in Honoria's chest loosened and ached at once. Trust, she thought, was not warmth. Not at first. It was the quiet terror of placing one careful foot where there had once been no floor. I will attend, she said. Sabine's needles clicked once, decisive as a judge's gavel. Good. I was growing bored of hiding indoors. Benedict did not smile, but the severity in him eased. There is one more matter. From his coat, he withdrew a small parcel wrapped in tissue. Honoria recognized the shape before he opened it. The second pearl grey glove. The mate to the one she had accepted in Hyde Park. He placed it on the table between them. I brought this because it belongs to the pair. Not because I expect you to wear it. Honoria looked at the new glove, then at the torn old one. Most men would have sent flowers. Flowers die quickly and require too much interpretation. And gloves do not. They require hands. That seems more honest. The remark was dry, almost severe, yet it carried a gentleness that made Sabine glance toward the fire as if granting them privacy by force of will. Honoria picked up the new glove. The leather was soft, finely made, unmarked by ink or old repairs. For one moment she imagined wearing both and letting the world believe the torn pair had been discarded. It would be easier. It would also be untrue. She set the new glove back in his direction. Not yet. He accepted the refusal without flinching. No, if you ask again, ask when scandal is no longer standing between us. His gaze held hers. Then I shall earn the right to ask when only truth remains. The words did not press. That was why they stayed with her. After he departed, still without crossing the threshold of any room not granted to him, Honoria stood at the window and watched his carriage leave Half Moon Street. 2 houses down, one of his men remained at a respectful distance, pretending interest in the rain while watching the street. Protection without possession. It was imperfect. It was also new. Behind her, Sabine folded the invitation to Lady Rennick's dinner and set it beside the forged receipt. Well, she said. Tomorrow, Portia will expect you to break. Honoria touched the torn glove beneath the paperweight, then lifted it free. Then tomorrow, she said, she must learn I have already done that once and survived it. Lady Rennick's dinner began with soup, candlelight, and the unmistakable sense that every person at the table had been invited for a reason not written on the card. Honoria understood it the moment she entered the drawing-room on Sabine's arm and saw the arrangement of faces. Lady Portia stood near the mantel in garnet silk, speaking softly to Mrs. Anstruther with an expression of injured patience. Cecily sat near a low table, pale in white muslin, her eyes lowered and her mouth arranged into the fragile curve of a girl wronged by circumstances too delicate to name. The Duke of Aldermere stood across the room with Lady Rennick, his face unreadable, his posture still enough to seem carved from decision. He looked at Honoria once. Not long. Not possessively. Only enough to say, without sound, that he saw her arrive and would not move unless she asked. It steadied her more than his arm would have done. Honoria wore dove-grey silk, her mother's seed pearls, and no new gloves. The torn pearl-grey glove lay folded inside her reticule, beside Mr. Lidgate's copied receipt. Her left hand remained bare. Her right hand wore the single glove Benedict had given her in Hyde Park, a compromise visible only to those who knew how to read it. Lady Rennick crossed the room to receive her. "My dear Lady Honoria," she said, with a warmth sharp enough to cut through the whispers. "You are precisely on time. I value that in a world where too many people arrive late and pretend it is style. Punctuality is one of the few ornaments I can afford without criticism," Honoria replied. Lady Rennick's eyes gleamed. "You underestimate criticism. It is endlessly inventive." Dinner was announced before Lady Portia could claim Honoria with false affection. The procession into the dining room placed Honoria between Sabine and Sir Edmund Vale, a distant cousin who had spent years avoiding family difficulties unless they came with a good cellar. Benedict sat across from her, not close enough for intimacy, but visible whenever Portia spoke. That, Honoria suspected, was Lady Rennick's design. The first courses passed with brittle civility. Conversation touched weather, opera, the approaching charity concert, and the shocking decline of handwriting among the young. Then Lady Portia laid down her spoon and sighed. "Handwriting," she said. "What a treacherous subject. A careless hand can make such misery when joined to an overwrought heart." Cecily's lashes fluttered. Mrs. Anstruther leaned forward by less than an inch. Lady Rennick did not move, but the footman behind her chair became very interested in the wine decanter. Honoria felt the table tilt toward her. Not physically. Socially. It was a practiced sensation. The gathering of appetite disguised as concern. "Indeed," Sabine said. "A forged hand can make even more." Lady Portia smiled at her. "My dear Mrs. March, how severe. I was speaking of ladies who write desperate letters and later regret their candor." The room quieted by degrees. Benedict's gaze rested on Honoria, then lowered, as if honoring his promise not to speak first. She saw the restraint cost him something. Good. Let it cost him. That was how a promise proved itself. Cecily whispered, "Aunt, please." It was perfectly pitched. Not enough to stop Portia. Enough to make Cecily appear unwilling. Lady Portia touched her hand. No, darling. I will not have you made uncomfortable by shadows and accusations. You have suffered enough confusion. Honoria set down her glass. The sound was small, but it cleared a path. Have I accused Miss Vale? Not aloud, Portia said. You are too clever for that. Then perhaps we should remain with what has been said aloud. Portia's eyes narrowed. Very well. A note was written. It caused distress. A scandal sheet printed what no respectable person should have seen. Now we sit here while half of London wonders whether His Grace was nearly trapped by sentiment. A slight movement went around the table. Sir Edmund coughed into his napkin. Cecily's cheeks flushed with something that might have been fear or anger. Benedict remained silent. Honoria looked at Lady Portia, and for the first time in her life, she did not feel smaller under that gaze. If I begged His Grace for marriage, she said calmly, why was the letter copied before he had answered it? The silence was immediate. It had weight. Mrs. Anstruther stopped with her fork halfway to her plate. Sir Edmund stared. Cecily looked up too fast. Lady Portia's expression did not break, but it tightened at the edges. I do not understand you. That surprises me. The question is plain. Honoria turned slightly so the table could hear without forcing her voice. The forged note reached Aldermere House after midnight. The scandal sheet received a copy soon enough to print by the following evening. Whoever sent the copy did not know whether His Grace would respond with rejection, concern, or silence. Yet the sheet was prepared to make my supposed desperation public before any reply could matter. Lady Renwick leaned back in her chair. A neat point. Too neat, Lady Portia said. It sounds rehearsed. Truth often sounds rehearsed to those who hoped never to hear it organized. Sabine gave a soft approving hum. Benedict's hand rested still beside his plate, but his eyes had changed. Honoria saw pride there, and something deeper that he had no right to show yet. She looked away before it warmed her. Portia recovered with speed born of long practice. You speak of forgery now because you wish to escape the consequences of your own imprudence. First a letter, then a drive, then fleeing your family's house as though we had mistreated you. What is the next claim? That household funds have somehow become a romance plot. No, Honoria said. Not romance. Arithmetic. Sir Edmund blinked. Arithmetic. My settlement payments have been irregular for years. Mr. Lidgate wrote to me 3 times regarding false receipts. I received none of those letters. Portia's face sharpened. This is outrageous. It is also documented. By whom? A solicitor eager to please an unmarried woman who now imagines herself under ducal protection. Benedict's gaze lifted, but he did not speak. Honoria felt the force of his silence beside her, not behind her. She continued. Mr. Lidgate was my mother's solicitor before he was mine. He gains nothing by inventing missing letters. And you gain everything by inventing injury. Portia turned to the table. Can none of you see it? Bitterness has made her cruel. She was disappointed, embarrassed, and now she punishes the family that sheltered her. The word sheltered almost made Honoria laugh. It would have sounded too sharp, so she let it pass. Shelter does not intercept letters. You have no proof that I did. I said the letters did not reach me. You supplied yourself as the accused. Colour touched Portia's throat. Cecily made a small sound. At that moment, the dining room door opened, not fully, but enough for Lady Renwick's butler to appear with a message. He bowed to his mistress. My lady, the footman from Vale House has arrived as requested. He says the matter is urgent. Lady Portia's head turned. What footman? Lady Renwick smiled faintly. The one who carried a sealed packet from your maid to a printer's clerk, I believe. I thought he might prefer to wait until after dessert, but urgency has its own manners. The table froze. Cecily's face lost all colour. Portia rose halfway. This is intolerable. Most truth is, Sabine said. At first. Benedict finally spoke, his voice quiet and edged with authority. If the man fears for his position or reference, he will be protected. Lady Portia turned on him. Your Grace has no authority over my servants. No, he said. But I have influence over whether any respectable household in London punishes a servant for telling the truth before witnesses. The warning settled like a seal pressed into wax. Lady Renwick nodded to the butler. The footman entered. He was young, pale, and terrified enough to look 5 years younger. Honoria recognized him from the breakfast room, the one whose hand had shaken when the Duke's card arrived. He bowed so low he nearly lost his balance. Speak plainly, Lady Renwick said. No one here will interrupt you except me, and I dislike repeating myself. The footman swallowed. I carried a packet, my lady. From Miss Vale's maid. She said it was to go to a clerk near Fleet Street. I didn't know what was inside. Cecily whispered, no. Lady Portia's voice cut cold. Careful, Thomas. A servant's character is easily ruined by exaggeration. Benedict's chair moved back less than an inch. He did not stand. He did not need to. And preserved by honesty, he said. Thomas looked toward him, then toward Honoria. Shame filled his eyes. I saw the direction, my lady. It had to do with a printer. The maid said Lady Portia wanted it gone before morning. A collective breath moved around the table. Not loud. Devastating. Lady Portia's face became very still. A servant's word, she said, against mine. Honoria rose. No one had asked her to. No one stopped her. No, she said. A servant's word, a forged note, missing letters, false receipts, and a stain on a glove you all found amusing enough to remember. Lady Portia stared at her. The old power was still there, but it no longer filled the room. It had edges now. It could be measured. You will regret this, Portia said softly. Honoria looked at the woman who had made regret her daily furniture for years. No, she said. I have spent 20 years regretting silence. I am done regretting speech. Lady Renwick folded her napkin. Then tomorrow morning we shall hear the evidence properly in my drawing room. I will invite those whose names matter and whose ears function. Lady Portia, you may attend or be represented by your absence. Either will speak. The dinner was over after that, though courses still remained. Honoria left the room on Sabine's arm with her heart beating hard and her head clear. In the hall, Benedict came only near enough to be heard. You spoke magnificently. I spoke truly. That is rarer. She looked at him then. You kept your promise. His face softened by the smallest degree. Barely. Barely counts when it costs something. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Sabine cleared her throat with no subtlety at all. Honoria almost smiled. Behind them, Lady Portia's voice rose in the dining room, sharp and controlled and afraid. Tomorrow, at last, fear would have to sit where Honoria had sat for years, under the eyes of a room that expected an answer. By 10 the next morning, Lady Renwick's drawing room had become a court without a bench, a chamber of judgment disguised by damask curtains, polished tables, and the pleasant clink of teacups no one truly wanted. Honoria arrived with Sabine at her side and the torn pearl-grey glove in her reticule, folded around the ink stain like a secret that had waited long enough to speak. Lady Renwick had chosen her witnesses with merciless skill. Mrs. Anstruther sat stiffly near the window, no longer eager but trapped by her own curiosity. Sir Edmund Vale hovered beside the bookcase, looking as if he wished family honour were something one could inherit without defending. 2 older ladies of rank occupied the sofa, both famous for remembering everything that was not said in their presence. Benedict stood near the mantel, severe in dark blue, his expression controlled. He did not approach Honoria at once. He only bowed, and in that restraint she felt the promise he had made at Half Moon Street. He would stand beside her when asked. Not before. Lady Portia arrived last. That was deliberate. A late entrance allowed pride to pretend it had not been summoned. She wore deep green silk and diamonds too bright for mourning, her chin lifted, her mouth set in patient injury. Cecily followed in pale muslin, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. The girl had slept badly or had been made to look as though she had. Honoria could no longer tell where Cecily's fear ended and Lady Portia's training began. Lady Rennick closed her fan. The sound was soft. Everyone heard it. "We are gathered," she said, "because last night accusations were made, questions were raised, and my dinner was ruined before the fish could be properly appreciated. I dislike waste. We shall have truth instead." Sabine murmured, "A fair exchange." Lady Portia smiled thinly. "Lady Rennick, surely this has grown beyond proportion. A few foolish printed lines, a nervous servant, a woman's wounded feelings. Must we make a spectacle of family misunderstanding?" Honoria looked at her. "No. We must end one." The words settled before anyone could smooth them away. Lady Portia's eyes hardened, but Benedict remained silent. Honoria took strength from it. She moved to the small table Lady Rennick had cleared for the evidence and opened her reticule. First came the torn glove. Then Mr. Lygate's copied receipts. Then the forged note Benedict had sent back to her that morning under seal, untouched since he had received it. She placed them in a careful line. The old glove looked very small against the dark polished wood. That, perhaps, was why it hurt. So much cruelty had been fastened to something so slight. Cecily stared at it as though the leather might rise and accuse her aloud. Lady Portia looked away. "This glove," Honoria said, "was torn at Lady Rennick's assembly when Miss Cecily lifted it from my hand to display the mending." Cecily whispered, "I said I was sorry." "You said so after it tore." Honoria turned the glove so the wrist faced the room. "Before that, your fingers marked the seam with fresh ink." "I had been writing earlier," Cecily said too quickly. "That isn't a crime." "No. It is a beginning." Honoria unfolded the forged note. Her pulse beat in her throat, but her voice stayed steady. "This note was sent to His Grace after midnight. It was written to appear as if I had begged him to preserve my reputation by marrying me." Mrs. Anstruther looked down, embarrassed now that the shame had a body in the room. Honoria continued. "The same words appeared in a scandal sheet before His Grace had answered. That means the purpose was not to secure his help. The purpose was to expose me." Lady Portia sighed. "You speak very cleverly for a victim, my dear." Benedict moved. Only slightly. Honoria did not look at him. "A victim who thinks is inconvenient. I understand." Sabine's mouth twitched. Lady Rennick's eyes gleamed. Honoria picked up the glove and the note together. "The ink on the glove matches the ink used in the forged note closely enough that Mr. Lygate noticed it at once when I sent him both for comparison. It is a common blue-black writing ink, yes. But the mark on the glove was made before the note could have reached Aldermere House, and it was left by the hand that had been writing in the assembly room." Cecily's breathing changed. Lots of people were writing. Dance cards. Notes. Everyone writes. Everyone did not tear my glove. The silence that followed was not loud, but it seemed to strip color from the room. Lady Portia turned toward her niece with a glance so sharp that Cecily flinched. Then Portia recovered. A girl's foolishness, if anything. Cecily may have copied some phrase in jest. Young ladies do not always understand consequences. I will not see her destroyed because Honoria has chosen to magnify embarrassment. Cecily looked at her aunt, and something like betrayal crossed her face. In jest, she whispered. Lady Portia ignored her. If any note was written, it was childish nonsense. The money matters, however, are another thing entirely. Lady Honoria has always been confused about them. Honoria lifted the copied receipts. These are not confusing. They bear signatures resembling mine, accepting quarterly settlement payments I never received. Sir Edmund shifted uncomfortably. Good heavens, Portia. Lady Portia snapped her gaze toward him. Do not be absurd. Household allowances pass through many hands. Honoria lived under my roof. Expenses were naturally absorbed. Absorbed, Sabine repeated. A tidy word for swallowed. Lady Rennick nodded to the butler. The door opened, and Thomas, the young footman from Vale House, entered with a man in plain dark clothing. The second man held his hat in both hands and looked as if every chair in the room outranked him. Benedict finally spoke. This is the printer's clerk who received the packet. The clerk bowed awkwardly. My ladies. Your Grace. Lady Portia's lips thinned. Are we now receiving tradesmen in drawing rooms as judges? Today, Lady Rennick said, we are receiving truth wherever society has forced it to stand. Benedict addressed the clerk. Tell them only what you told my secretary. No more. The man swallowed. A packet came through a maid from Vale House. I was paid to carry the copy to the sheet. I didn't write it. I didn't know the lady. Which maid? Lady Rennick asked. Miss Cecily Vale's maid brought it out, my lady. But she said Lady Portia wanted it gone before morning. Cecily made a small broken sound. Lady Portia turned on her. Do not be foolish, Cecily. Say nothing. The command did what accusation could not. It broke the girl's fear in the wrong direction. Cecily rose from her chair. You said it would make him come to me instead. The room froze. Lady Portia's face lost all expression. Sit down. No, Cecily's voice shook, but she did not sit. You said if Cousin Honoria looked desperate, His Grace would realize she was unsuitable. You said everyone would laugh for a day, and then they'd forget her, because they always do. Honoria felt the words strike, but not as they once would have. They no longer found the same obedient wound. Benedict's face had gone white with contained fury. Still, he did not interrupt. Cecily's eyes filled. I wrote the note. I copied her hand from old invitations. I only meant to make her ridiculous. Aunt Portia said it wasn't wicked if it prevented a worse mistake. Lady Portia stepped toward her. You ungrateful child. Benedict's voice stopped her. Do not threaten her. It was not loud. It was absolute. Lady Portia stilled. The printer's clerk stared at the carpet. Thomas looked near tears. Honoria looked at Cecily, who suddenly seemed very young and very poorly loved. And the receipts? Honoria asked. Cecily shook her head. I didn't know about those. I swear I didn't. Aunt Portia said Cousin Honoria cost too much. She said the money was better used where it could still purchase a future. The room reacted then, not with one sound but with many small betrayals of shock. A breath. A cup set down too quickly. Sir Edmund muttering Portia's name as if he had never known it before. Lady Portia drew herself up, pride assembling around her like armor. I used what was necessary to maintain this family's position. Honoria had no household, no children, no prospects. Cecily had a chance. I will not apologize for choosing the living future over a woman determined to make a shrine of disappointment. For a moment, no one spoke. Honoria had imagined this confession would feel like victory. It did not. It felt like a door opening onto a room she had lived in for years without knowing its name. She reached for the glove. The torn seam lay against her palm, familiar, damaged, still real. You thought I had no future, she said. So you spent it. Lady Portia's mouth tightened. Do not make poetry of accounts. Do not make necessity of theft. Benedict stepped nearer, not to stand before her, but beside her. He stopped with enough space that the choice remained hers. May I stand with you now? He asked quietly. Honoria looked at him, then at the room, then at the evidence on the table. She had carried silence for 20 years. She did not need to carry it alone any longer. Yes, she said. Now. The word changed something in him. He turned to Lady Rennick. The witnesses are sufficient for tomorrow's formal correction. My solicitor will work with Mr. Lydgate regarding restitution. No servant who has spoken here will lose character or employment for honesty. I will see to that. Lady Rennick inclined her head. And I will see that Mayfair hears what it must. Lady Portia laughed once, bitter and low. You all think this is finished because you have made me the villain of a morning entertainment. Society forgets. Money returns. Girls marry. Old women remain old. Honoria picked up the torn glove and held it where everyone could see the ink, the split seam, and the careful stitches that had failed only because someone else had pulled too hard. Then let society remember this, she said. I am old enough to know the difference between shame and truth. I am no longer young enough to confuse silence with grace. Lady Portia looked away first. It was a small thing. It was everything. Lady Rennick rose. Tomorrow morning, she said, we shall do this before the rest of the proper witnesses. Lady Portia, I advise you to consider whether you prefer apology with dignity or exposure without it. The room began to move again, slowly, as if everyone had to relearn the ordinary use of hands and feet. Cecily sank back into her chair and wept without beauty. Honoria did not comfort her. Not yet. Mercy, like love, would have to wait until truth had finished speaking. Benedict remained beside Honoria, close enough for warmth, not close enough to claim. The glove lay between them on the table, no longer hidden, no longer merely torn. It had become what Lady Portia had never believed Honoria possessed. Proof. By noon, Lady Rennick's drawing-room had ceased pretending to be a room for tea. The tea was present, of course, arranged in silver and porcelain on a side table, but no one touched it. The chairs had been placed with too much intention. The curtains had been drawn back to let in the hard winter light. The witnesses were not numerous, but they had been chosen with the precision of a woman who understood that society did not need a crowd to alter its mind. It needed the right ears. Lady Jersey's cousin sat near the window, grave and alert. Mrs. Anstruther had returned, paler than yesterday and less eager. Sir Edmund Vale stood beside the bookcase with the expression of a man realizing too late that indifference had been a form of participation. Sabine sat beside Honoria, her black-gloved hands folded over her cane. Benedict stood a few feet away, not behind Honoria and not before her. Beside her. That difference steadied more than any declaration could have done. On the small centre table lay the torn pearl-grey glove, the forged note, the copied receipts from Mr. Lydgate, and a written statement from the printer's clerk. They looked almost absurdly harmless. Paper. Leather. Ink. Yet Honoria knew how much of a life could be stolen by such quiet things. Lady Portia entered last again, but today lateness brought no authority with it. It only made the waiting more severe. Cecily followed her, dressed in pale blue, without ribbons, without her practiced brightness. She had the look of a girl who had discovered that obedience could still end in disgrace. Lady Rennick closed the door herself. The sound was final. We will proceed plainly, she said. I am too old to enjoy performances unless they are performed by professionals. Lady Portia's chin rose. Then I will begin by saying this entire affair has been inflated beyond reason. A foolish note was written by a foolish girl. Household accounts were handled under pressure. My late husband's family has always been difficult, and Lady Honoria has chosen this moment to punish me for years of care. Honoria felt the old words reach for her. Difficult. Ungrateful. Punish. They had once been enough to make her lower her head. Today, they sounded tired. She picked up the copied receipt and placed it nearer the light. Mr. Lydgate confirms that 3 letters addressed to me were never answered and 2 quarterly settlement payments were acknowledged by signatures not my own. You lived in my house, Portia said. You ate at my table. Your gowns, your carriage use, your candles, your servants. Did you imagine those cost nothing? I imagined, Honoria said, that if my money paid for them, I had the right to know. A small silence followed. Sir Edmund looked down. Lady Rennick's mouth tightened in approval. Portia changed direction. And the note? Must we pretend Lady Honoria has never longed for marriage? Never hoped? Never watched younger women chosen before her? Cecily wrote an unkind thing, yes, but she wrote what half the room already believed. Benedict took 1 step forward. Honoria lifted her hand slightly, and he stopped. The promise held. Honoria looked at Cecily. Did you write the note alone? Cecily's lips trembled. No, Lady Portia snapped. Cecily. The girl flinched, but she did not fall silent. No, Aunt. I won't carry it all. The contraction broke out of her like a sob. You told me what to write. You gave me Cousin Honoria's old invitations to copy her hand. You said if His Grace thought her desperate, he would see she was unsuitable. A murmur moved through the room and died at once. Portia turned very white. A frightened child will say anything to save herself. Then let her save herself with truth, Sabine said. The printer's clerk, summoned from the hall, gave his statement again in a shaking voice. The packet had come through Cecily's maid. The payment had been delivered with instruction that the paragraph appear quickly. Thomas, the Vale footman, confirmed that Lady Portia's maid had carried sealed household letters more than once to places not named on their direction. No modern court could have done the damage more neatly than that drawing-room. Each fact was small. Together, they left Lady Portia nowhere elegant to stand. Still, she tried. I did what necessity required, she said. Cecily is young. She had prospects. The family needed position. Honoria had her books, her corner, her habits. She was comfortable enough. Honoria felt the words enter her, then pass through without lodging. Comfortable enough. The phrase might have defined the rest of her life if no one had ever forced it into the light. No, she said. I was quiet enough. That is not the same thing. Lady Portia's eyes flashed. You speak now because a duke stands beside you. Honoria looked at Benedict, then back to Portia. No. He stands beside me because I spoke. Benedict's face changed. Not much. Enough. Lady Renwick's fan closed again. Lady Portia, you will apologize. I will not be instructed like a schoolgirl. Then be instructed like a woman whose name is about to travel through every room that once received her. Lady Renwick's voice remained pleasant. You will apologize to Lady Honoria. You will write a correction, witnessed here, stating that the note was forged and that the printed implication was false. You will surrender all correspondence concerning her settlement to Mr. Lidgate and his Grace's solicitor by tomorrow. You will withdraw Miss Cecily from the remainder of the season. Cecily bowed her head, crying silently now. Portia's hands clenched. You would ruin us. No, Honoria said. You mistook consequence for ruin because you have so rarely met it. The room held still. Portia looked from face to face, searching for rescue and finding only witnesses. At last, the pride in her did not break. It bent, which was colder. She turned to Honoria. I regret, she said, every word stiff with poison, that my actions caused you distress. Lady Renwick's brows rose. Benedict's gaze darkened. Honoria did not move. No, she said. Portia stared. I beg your pardon. That is not an apology. That is a complaint wearing mourning. Sabine made a sound suspiciously close to delight. Honoria kept her eyes on Portia. Say what you did. For a moment, Lady Portia looked as if hatred might choke her. Then the room, rank, evidence, and consequence closed around her. I intercepted your letters. I allowed your settlement funds to be diverted. I directed Cecily to write the note. I sent it to be printed. Her voice shook on the last sentence, not with remorse, but with fury. I apologize. Honoria waited. She found no triumph in herself, but she found something better. An end. I accept that the truth has been spoken, she said. Forgiveness is not required for justice to begin. Benedict looked at her then with such quiet reverence that she had to look away. Lady Renwick gave instructions for the written correction. Sir Edmund, shamed into usefulness, agreed to serve as family witness. The printer's clerk and Thomas were dismissed under the Duke's assurance that their honesty would not cost them their livelihood. Cecily paused before leaving and looked at Honoria. I'm sorry, she whispered. This time, the words were not graceful. They were bare. Honoria studied her young cousin, the girl who had been taught to spend another woman's humiliation as currency. Become someone who understands what that means, she said. Cecily nodded once and went out. When the room had thinned and the correction lay signed, Benedict finally turned fully to Honoria. Lady Renwick, with magnificent lack of subtlety, moved to the far window with Sabine. Not far enough to violate propriety. Far enough to grant mercy. Benedict held the torn glove, which Honoria had forgotten on the table. Lady Honoria, he said, before I ask anything, I must say this publicly enough for the people here to hear and privately enough for you to believe it. I was wrong. Her breath caught. Your Grace. No. I tried to turn my name into a shield before asking whether you wished to stand behind it. I mistook speed for care. I will not make that mistake again. He lowered his gaze to the glove, then back to her face. I ask now with scandal answered, truth spoken, and no debt between us. May I ask for your hand, not to repair a scandal, but because I love the woman who refused to be reduced by it. The words did not strike like thunder. They entered quietly, like warmth reaching a long cold room. Honoria thought of the girl she had been, waiting beside dance floors. She thought of the woman she had become, mending gloves by candlelight. She thought of every year society had called empty because no man had filled it. Then she looked at Benedict and saw not rescue, but recognition. I will not be your rescue, your grace, she said. His eyes shone with restraint. No, she placed her bare hand in his, the same hand London had mocked, the same hand that had held the evidence and refused to tremble. I will be your wife. Benedict bowed over her hand with a reverence no laughter could touch. Then I shall spend my life worthy of the difference. Behind them, Sabine sniffed once and denied it by glaring at the fireplace. Lady Rennick smiled into the window glass. Outside, London continued its noise, its hunger, its judgments. Inside, Honoria left the room no longer as a spinster to be pitied or a scandal to be discussed, but as the future Duchess of Aldermere, with her torn glove in one hand and her own future in the other. Aldermere Court did not receive Honoria as if she had been rescued. It received her as if the house had been waiting to be properly awakened. The carriage turned through iron gates on a clear September afternoon, months after Lady Rennick's drawing-room had changed the direction of her life, and the long avenue opened before her beneath ancient oaks touched with the first bronze of autumn. Hampshire lay wide and green around the estate, less glittering than London and far more honest. No carriage windows crowded with watchers. No fans lifted to hide whispers. No soft voices measured her age as if counting flaws on porcelain. Only fields, sky, stone, and the steady warmth of Benedict's hand resting beside hers, close enough to offer, never close enough to claim without invitation. Honoria looked ahead at the house as it rose beyond the sweep of lawn, pale and dignified, with tall windows catching the afternoon light. Aldermere Court was not the largest house she had ever seen, but it had a gravity that made size irrelevant. It looked like a place where decisions endured. "You are quiet," Benedict said. "I'm deciding whether your house intends to intimidate me. It has intimidated bishops, ambassadors, and 2 generations of my relations. I would advise caution." She glanced at him. "And what did it do to you?" His mouth softened. "It taught me to stand very still and call loneliness duty." The answer was too honest to be ornament. Honoria looked back at the house. "Then perhaps we shall teach it better manners. I'm relying on you for that." The carriage drew to a halt before the entrance. The household had assembled with formal care, the housekeeper, the steward, the butler, the maids, footmen, grooms, and gardeners standing in ordered ranks. Once, such a display might have made Honoria feel like an impostor wearing a borrowed future. Now she stepped down with Benedict's assistance and did not hide the steadiness of her hand. She wore a deep blue travelling gown, plain enough for dignity and fine enough for her new rank. At her left hand gleamed a wedding ring. In her reticule, wrapped in tissue, lay the torn pearl grey glove. She had refused to leave it in London. Some things, once used for shame, deserved to witness peace. Benedict led her to the threshold, then turned to the assembled household. His voice carried clearly over the gravel. "This is her grace, the Duchess of Aldermere, mistress of this house and partner in all that concerns it. You will bring matters of the estate to her as you would bring them to me, and you will find her judgment better than mine in a great many things." A ripple passed through the household, not disobedient, only surprised. Honoria felt the word settle around her, not as decoration, but as structure. Mistress of this house. Partner. Judgment. The housekeeper, Mrs. Vale, not by blood and therefore innocent of that unfortunate name, curtsied deeply. "Your Grace, we are honoured to receive you." Honoria looked at the lined faces before her, the young maids trying not to stare, the old steward assessing whether she would prove ornamental or useful, the footman solemn in livery. "Thank you," she said. "I hope to know the household by name before I am expected to command it with any confidence." The steward blinked. The youngest kitchen maid smiled before remembering herself. Benedict's eyes warmed, though he kept his expression properly ducal. Inside, Aldermere Court smelled of beeswax, old wood, flowers from the garden, and the faint lavender laid in linen chests. Honoria was shown through the hall, the morning room, the long gallery, and the library where Benedict confessed he had once hidden from 3 aunts and a bishop during a Christmas visit. At the same time, she asked. Yes. I was 9. It remains one of my more successful political maneuvers. She laughed then, truly, and the sound moved through the library as if the room had not heard such a thing in years. Later, after tea, Sabine arrived in a travelling carriage with 2 trunks, 1 maid, and a face arranged to suggest she had not been longing to inspect everything. She pronounced the staircase respectable, the tea excellent, and the south drawing-room too gloomy for any woman not already committed to melancholy. You will have the curtains changed, she told Honoria. I have been Duchess for 6 hours. Then you are behind. Benedict bowed to Sabine with solemn gravity. Mrs. March, Aldermere Court trembles before you. It should. Large houses are only tolerable when frightened into usefulness. Honoria smiled into her cup. The peace of it nearly hurt. Not because she expected it to vanish, but because she could feel how long she had lived without such ordinary ease. In the weeks that followed, consequences continued to travel in quieter forms than scandal. Lady Portia left London before the end of the season, accompanied not by sympathy but by the cold civility of doors no longer fully open. Her control over Honoria's settlement ended under the joint management of Mr. Lydgate and Benedict's solicitor. Every diverted payment was accounted for and restored, not with theatrical punishment, but with the far more lasting humiliation of documented truth. Cecily was sent to a strict relation in the country, away from ribbons, assemblies, and Lady Portia's ambitions. She wrote once to Honoria, a short letter with uncertain penmanship and no excuses. I am trying to understand what I did. I don't ask you to forgive me yet. Honoria placed the letter in a drawer. Not burned. Not answered. Not forgotten. Mercy, she had learned, was strongest when it did not rush to excuse what truth had only just exposed. With the restored funds, Honoria established a modest trust for gentlewomen without protectors, women too well-born for trade, too poor for comfort, too proud to beg, and too often managed by relatives who used dependents as a bridle. Benedict read the draft beside her in the library, one shoulder against the mantel, the autumn rain tapping against the windows. You have named no patroness, he said. I thought the Duchess of Aldermere would do. She will, Honoria answered. But I do not wish the fun to be about me. It is not about you. It is because of you. There is a difference. She looked up. He had become very good at differences. Rescue and respect. Silence and grace. Shelter and control. Apology and escape. Love and possession. Do you approve? She asked. Benedict crossed the room and set the papers gently on the desk. I admire it. Approval would imply I had authority over it. A careful answer. I married a woman who listened closely. A wise precaution. The wisest of my life. The words were quiet. They still had the power to reach her. Some evenings, Honoria found herself walking through Aldermere Court simply because she could. Not as a guest measuring how little space she might occupy. Not as a poor relation avoiding the good rooms. As mistress of a house where her steps required no apology. She learned the steward's reports, corrected household economies that had been neglected under the assumption that a duke's fortune could survive anything, and opened the West Parlour to village women who came seeking advice with letters they could not decipher alone. She did not become young. She did not become dazzling. She became present. That was better. On the first Sunday after their return from church, Benedict found her in the library standing before a small glass case he had placed on the writing table by the window. Inside lay her mended pearl grey glove, the torn seam still visible, the ink stain faded but not gone. Beside it rested a small velvet cushion holding a plain gold ring she no longer wore because her wedding band had replaced it. It was the old ring from her mother's walnut box, the one she had once kept among dance cards and unanswered hopes. I wondered if you would dislike it, Benedict said from the doorway. Honoria did not turn at once. No, he came to stand beside her. I did not want to hide it away. Neither did I. It deserves better than a drawer. She looked at the glove beneath the glass. Once, it had been evidence of economy. Then ridicule. Then proof. Now it was something stranger and gentler. A witness that had survived every meaning forced upon it. I used to think my hand was made only to mend what others tore, she said. Benedict took that hand then, not urgently, not publicly, not as a duke correcting a room, but as a husband honoring a truth. His thumb rested lightly over her wedding ring. It was the hand that held your courage together when no one else knew what it cost. Her throat tightened. You make it sound noble. It was lonely. I know. He lifted her hand and kissed it with the same reverence he had shown the night he picked up her torn glove before all those watching eyes. It will not be lonely again if I have any say in the matter. Honoria turned toward him. Through the window beyond the glass case, Aldermere's lawn stretched under a clear afternoon sky. Somewhere below, Sabine was terrorizing the housekeeper into improving the south drawing room. Somewhere in London, Lady Portia was learning that consequence could be quieter than gossip and far more enduring. Somewhere in the country, Cecily was perhaps beginning to understand that beauty without character was a poor dowry. Honoria stood in the library of her own home, her hand held by the man who had learned not merely to choose her, but to see her. Benedict, she said, because some names became safe only after love made them so. Yes? I did not arrive late to happiness. His eye softened. No, she looked again at the glove and ring resting together beneath the glass. I arrived when I was ready to recognize it. He smiled then, not the public smile of a duke, but the private one of a man who had been found in his own loneliness and forgiven for not knowing sooner how to leave it. Outside, the bells from the village church carried faintly across the park, clear and unhurried. Honoria listened until the last note faded. Then she placed her free hand over his and stood beside him in the quiet, no longer at the edge of any room, no longer waiting for a life to begin, while the mended pearl-grey glove rested beside the wedding ring at Aldermere Court, no longer a sign of shame, but proof that the hand London mocked had been chosen with honor.